Okay. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regular session of council for September the 13th, 2022. Before I call the meeting to order, if you just turn that off, please. I do have a couple of things that I would like to say. Before we start the meeting this evening, I would like to, on behalf of council, staff, and the residents of Greater Napanee, express our sincere sympathy to the royal family for the loss of their and our Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, always serving Crown, country, and Commonwealth in a selfless manner. Thank you, ma'am. I would ask that you stand if you are able and remove your head coverings for a moment of silence in Her Majesty's honor. Thank you. On another note, the election process is in full swing, and I wish to remind all the candidates within the gallery tonight and on future nights of this council sitting that these council meetings are just that, they're meetings. They do not provide any opportunity for candidates to approach those who have come to conduct business. Over the past few meetings, I have observed candidates approach residents who have been in attendance for deputations or other business that they might have with the municipality. I would ask that everyone adhere to this request. Thank you. With that, I will call the meeting to order. Of course, this meeting is being live streamed on our YouTube channel. If you wish to access the agenda, it is available on our website at greaternapanee.com. I would look for an adoption of the agenda, but there are a few amendments, please. Everybody got their pens ready? If we could move 10.4 to follow 4.3, and with that, after 4.3, 11.3, please. Everybody got that? We'll move 10.4 to follow 4.3, and following that, we will have 11.3. It allows me to stay in the room instead of having to jump in and out all the time. I would look then for a motion, please, to adopt the agenda as amended. Councillor McCormack, Deputy Mayor Kaiser, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof? Seeing none, I am going to be declaring a conflict of interest in 4.2, 10.4, and 11.3. I have a family member who has lands across the road from the subject lands. We have a public meeting now under the Planning Act. I need a resolution, please, to convene the public meeting. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Michael. Pardon? Oh, yes.
Okay, item 4.2, zoning bylaw amendment application PLZACO 2022-001. The applicant is 2694440 Ontario Limited. Legal part lot 19, concession 7 part 1. Some other parts. Geographic Township of Fredericksburg, Town of Greater Napanee. The address is 124 Old Hamburg Road, and the effect would be to allow the subject lands to be developed through a plan of subdivision consisting of a variety of residential built forms, supportive commercial, and parkland. Michael, would you please?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. With us this evening, we have the applicant's planning consultant, Mr. Sean Legere of RFA Planning, We've seen Sean on this application a few times previously. The reason we're having this public meeting this evening is because there was no official statutory public meeting as it related to the zoning bylaw amendment application for this subdivision. So that's what we're holding this evening. We have spoken about the zoning a couple of times previously at the public meeting and at the decision meeting in August. And what I will do now is I'll invite Sean up to once again just give a very brief overview for the benefit of the public and for council as a refresher as it relates to the proposed zoning for the lands for this subdivision. I did just very recently, just previous to this meeting and coming up here, receive an objection email from a member of the public. I'm not entirely certain if they're in attendance this evening, but after Mr. Legere gives his overview, we can invite any members of the public up to make any representations as they so choose. And if the member is not in attendance this evening, then I can read the letter or the email out for council's benefit. So I'll invite Mr. Legere out here.
Good evening, my name is Sean Legere, Senior Planner with RFA Planning Consultants. I already had an introduction, but have to formally say that. As he said, I've been here a few times, and so we just have a very, very brief refresher for you. So here we have the subject lands. It's recently undergone a series of planning approvals. So we currently have medium density and environmental protection designations that were approved by council previously. The site's 29.3 hectares. There's a series of land uses, golf course to the west. We have M2 lands and cemetery to the north. We have a series of rural residential and rural uses to the west, east, and some rural residential uses to the south. The plan of subdivision was approved by council in August. The previous meeting, again, I've been here before. So we have a 487 unit development with a series of single detached, semi-detached freehold townhouses, back-to-back townhouses and apartment units with a series of other new streets, blocks for active and passive parkland, stormwater management and drainage, road widenings to Old Hamburg Road, and in total 6 new streets with a net residential density of 29 dwelling units per hectare. I thought I would keep this one, not because it's pretty, but because it, just by way of explanation, we use what we call a development site plan to prepare the zoning bylaw document. It helps us greatly we input, you can see there's buildings everywhere, so it's a tool we use to highlight all the minimums and maximums that we need to in order to determine what the actual physical document will contain. So I just wanted to, by way of explanation as to the primary function of this drawing, aside to highlight, sidewalk locations, the fact that there'll be street trees, other elements such as the decorative fencing along Old Hamburg Road. We have in the draft conditions that was agreed to do some additional privacy fencing of the rear yard areas for the lots that side onto Old Hamburg Road, so it was nice and consistent to create a wonderful streetscape. And it also highlights other features such as where a potential trail could go, and so on and so forth. So we do use this as a tool to prepare the zoning bylaw document. That's why I did leave it in for this very brief presentation. So the rezoning itself, so I thought I would just run through them all very quickly, but just to highlight the main points of each. So the R5-21 zone we're requesting is the flex zone. So it's to contain single detached, semi-detached row dwelling houses and allow for this flexibility of some minor adjustments going forward as the project unfolds. That's why we call it the flex zone. And so the main function of that is to harmonize between the R4 and R5 zones, all the different dwelling types within those two zones, just to harmonize the various provisions. The R522 zone has the same provisions with the exception of a rear yard setback of 20 meters from an industrial zone. And that's to ensure sufficient area for the required berm and also to ensure adequate outdoor living area. So it ensures the dwelling will be a minimum of 20 meters from those property, that rear lot line. So the R523, sorry, the colors. So we have the orange, that's the orange you see in the top. And so the R521 is the beige. So moving on to the R523, which is the pink in the very top corner, and that's for the introducing the back-to-back housing, dwelling house form, which is technically new for the zoning bylaw, although there's a similar definition currently in the zoning bylaw for stacked townhouses. But technically row or back-to-back townhouses aren't in the bylaw, so we did make a special provision for that, and also to carry all these forward, all the proper lot area, lot frontage, how many dwelling units are permitted in that block, that kind of thing. Other special provisions for that zone are to bring forward a 20-meter setback from the industrial zone and also a 30-meter setback from the CN right-of-way. Moving on to the R6-18 zone, which is the purple, you see in sort of the bottom left, center left, and that's for the apartment dwelling houses. So there's really very little special provisions for that aside from ensuring that we can have 3 dwelling houses or 3 apartment buildings, which is reflective, as I was pointing out earlier, of the development site plan. So we've accounted for 3. And so the site-specific zoning accounts for that. We've discussed before, but the main change between then and now, so to speak, is the fact that we're tweaking the wording with respect to commercial uses on the apartment block or the R6 zone block. So we worked closely together with the IBI group and staff to fine-tune the wording essentially, fine-tune the uses, fine-tune a minimum and maximum, and that it could be both in the ground floor and, or as a standalone structure, single story only. So that's just basically the main item that we've sorted out to the previous public meetings. Otherwise, what we've previously presented in August and the prior March public meetings is almost exactly the same, except for that one zone we just needed a bit extra time to tweak the wording. We have OS zones, which is the light green scattered throughout the site, largely along the west, some along the north, and some along the south. And so that accommodates safety berms that are adjacent to road allowances, and also naturalized drainage corridor that's along the south, and the parkland and trail connections. Lastly, the EP zone, which is the dark green, which consists of the watercourse, top of bank, and the applicable setbacks are included in that. So it's not just the feature itself, but it also includes the required setbacks. So there's 15 and 30 meter setbacks respectively, depending on the feature. So we've accounted for that, included it in not only in the block itself, but in the zoning. And that the area has been added behind lots 34 to 39. Which is very central on the figure there. It was just one of those changes to the draft plan. We just rejigged the parkland slightly to basically better delineate the active and passive uses. So that was just a very minor adjustment that was made to the draft plan. So the zoning was updated to reflect the update to the block outline. So that's a very brief outline. My clicker is frozen. Michael. Pardon? There we go. You've seen this chart before. It looks a little complex, but again, the zoning bylaw request is essentially to harmonize between all the different dwelling types, harmonize the various provisions, and I've talked about some of the more specifics already, but this is sort of a zoom out of what I just talked about. And everything's been incorporated into the amending bylaw for decision tonight. We've worked closely with staff and the municipal planning consultant, and basically we're literally on the same page. Everybody's happy with the document, and so we're just simply here to request a decision of the rezoning tonight, which is a condition of draft approval, of which we've already received from council. So thank you.
Okay, council, any questions for Mr. Leger at this point? No? Michael, sorry, was there anyone in the group speaking otherwise for or against? Seeing no one, maybe you want to just confirm who you got your email from. I see a hand in the back row. Are you the sender of the email? Would you like to speak to it, or would you prefer Mr. Nobes just read the letter, or?
If Mr. Nobles wants to read the letter, I think that should be.
Okay, you okay with that, Michael?
Yep, that's fine.
Please.
So this is from Mr. Norman Plogue, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, of 147 Old Hamburg Road. The email reads, Mr. Nobes, please consider this to be a written formal submission to the town council to request that the town of Greater Napanee reconsider the zoning bylaw amendment for the property known as 124 Old Hamburg Road. The areas surrounding this proposed subdivision are currently zoned rural. My concern is largely based on the relatively sudden injection of approximately 500 new residences, along with an estimated 1,500 people and an estimated 800 more vehicles swarming through what is currently a peaceful and quiet rural setting. The proposed subdivision most certainly does not harmonize with the current land use of the surrounding properties and would cause significant and prolonged stresses to the current residents of the area. One must also take into consideration the complete lack of local infrastructure east of Napanee to support such a large population increase, such as school, public transportation, retail, fuel, etc. I also formally request that I be informed of any developments or decisions regarding the above matter. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, you satisfied with that? Thank you. Any comments or questions after that? Seeing none, anything further from you, Michael?
Nothing further to add. Just to respond to the comment, and Mr. Leger, if he wishes to add any further comment, he can. Staff and our municipal planning consultant did take into great consideration the area as a whole, potential future development of the area. You know, how that area ultimately would grow throughout the life of our official plan and future official plan update. Yes, it will be quite a change to the area, but it is contained within the town's urban boundary, which development of this kind is ultimately contemplated at some point in time. Understandably, it is it will be a bit of a shock to the area, quite a drastic change in the face of the greater area here, but again, with the lands being in the urban area and receiving the official plan amendments previously, staff are supportive of the applications as presented and the bylaw as presented this evening. So if there's any further questions of council, I'd be happy to answer those, and if Mr. Leger wanted to add anything further, then I would welcome that now.
You're not required to, but if you wish to. No? Okay. Anything further? Mr. McCormack.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to point out, I think we asked this question some time ago. The time that it'll take to go through this whole development, I mean, we're looking at years and years. So possibly it gives us time also to address concerns from the gentleman for additional infrastructure, schools, services and whatnot.
Absolutely. If I could just add to that too, it is the responsibility of the developer to extend water services, wastewater services, Cogeco, Bell, natural gas, et cetera. It is the responsibility of the developer to pay for all of that infrastructure to service the development, roads, everything. Once that's all installed and inspected, there are warranty periods, inspection schedules, et cetera. That would then, in turn be dedicated over to the municipality. So essentially we're getting infrastructure provided to us at no cost, but we are on the hook for maintenance in perpetuity of that infrastructure. But as Councillor McCormack pointed out, we do have some time. There is a long it's quite a number of units to be developed. It certainly won't happen within 1, 2, or 3 years. We're looking probably around 5 plus, I would think, at least, for full build out of this entire subdivision. The county is aware of entrance upgrades that need to occur at County Road 2 and Old Hamburg Road. Again, those would be the responsibility of the developer to install slip lanes, left turn, right turn lanes, et cetera, to accommodate the flow of traffic. They are also very well aware of issues at Palace Road and County Road 2. It's on their horizon within, I believe, about the 5-year time frame to either signalize, put in a roundabout, do some sort of upgrade there. That it's certainly on their high priority list for future capital upgrades. So those were points of contention in the traffic impact study, were the functionality of those intersections as a whole. County's aware, and the developer is required to provide upgrades on that municipal infrastructure on the county roads at their cost to service their development. So the land's offsite, meaning the Palace Road intersection with County Road 2, that's really a county initiative. It's already at a level of service where it really does need some attention. So although this development will be adding into that, it's basically at a tipping point now where it needs that attention. So county's well aware of it, but there's most certainly time to deal with these issues.
Okay. Maybe, Mr. Leger, I could ask you if you had any comments about the phasing development, just in light of those comments.
It's actually something I was contemplating. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So phase 1 is Street A. I don't know if I can go backwards, but it's the northerly street that's P-shaped. And so it's the lands that actually will back onto the M2 lands, as we call them, right in that top section on the north side of the, we're getting accommodated here, thank you. I don't know if this still works. Okay, aha. Maybe I'll do the nice color one, that's always nice. So Street A is that red line? Is that the pointer? Oh, there we go. Oh, you can't see it though. So Street A is off to the left there on the screen. That's phase 1, and it will include a lot of parkland, the stormwater management block, the street, and all those blocks that front and access off that Street A. So it's actually tucked all the way up. And so immediately, as the first phase, it won't visually impact, aside from those couple of folks across the road. I know there's a few homes up there right at the end of Champlain Street. So that it's very isolated in that respect in terms of the phase 1, the immediate impact. The phase 2 is south of the creek, and that will absolutely build out over quite a number of years. Possibly more than 5 in terms of getting all the way to the south and all the various, it'll be broken up into sub-stages, depending on, usually they try and loop phases, so one loop street will be done, then the next loop, so no temporary turnarounds need to be built is a typical practice, and additional parkland, stormwater management blocks, the drainage, so all that will progress over many, many, many years. And we've also included some urban design features, again, consistent fencing, decorative fencing, what we call the window streets, which is where the decorative fencing will be, was that urban design feature to help blend the development, so we're not backing onto Old Hamburg Road, we're fronting onto Old Hamburg Road with a nice decorative face. And also that it acts as a window to the development. So we're not just getting a wall. Essentially, it's all broken up with urban design features. So that's essentially just hopefully a bit more clarification as to the phasing and timing that was asked by the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there's nothing further from council, I think that wraps up the public meeting portion. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the public meeting. Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Johnson, thank you. All in favor of that? And carried. We will now jump to 10.4 on the agenda, Growth and Expansion Planning Report, PLZACO 2022-001, the Limestone Ridge rezoning application. The recommendation is that the council receive the information from the planning report Rezoning application, and further the council approved the zoning bylaw amendments subject to the following conditions. The council consider and decide the merits of written and verbal submissions received at the statutory public meeting and up to and including this council meeting. Michael, you have a report?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't have anything further to add at this point in time. It would be pertinent for council to consider the comments from Mr. Plogue that I had read this evening. Staff are still supportive of the proposal as it is presented in front of council this evening.
Council, you have a recommendation. Councilor McCormick, are you moving recommendation? I have a seconder for staff recommendation. Councilor Pennell. Any comments or further questions? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call all in favor. The motion is carried. Thank you. That moves us to 11.3, which is the bylaw. I should put my glasses on. Bylaw 2022-0061 to amend zoning bylaw 02-22 as amended PLZACO 2022-001. So you have the bylaw before you, which effectively conforms that zoning and adds those new zones. First and second reading from Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Norrie. Anything further? Seeing none, all in favor? Zoning bylaw is carried. Thank you. That does it for me, and I'll get the mayor. Thank you, Mr. Leger.
Max is the expert.
It's complicated. Andrew's pissed all kinds of good stuff.
Remember when this tax
Triggered for those.
Okay, so I can mark off 10.4.
5.1.
Yep, I just want to mark off the ones that I've
10.4 and 11.3 are done.
3. Okay, continuing on. Resolutions, 5.1, we
Yeah.
do,
Could you get really close because the wind's blowing in here?
okay, yep. Carrying on now with deputations. The first one up will be 5.2, Lennox and Addington Seniors Outreach Services. Diane, please. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you.
If you will make sure that you are speaking closely into the mic, so, and not rolling
And
back
seated-
into the crowd.
Seated appropriately. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks so much. I'll let you go ahead, please.
Okay, well, good evening, council, and good evening, Her Worship. I'm the new program manager at Seniors Outreach Services as of this past May 2022. And I've learned that council is well aware of the past history of ups and downs and problems that it's had. But I'm here to report to you some of the updates, and the current trajectory of our organization is extremely positive. We have recently acquired the use of the gymnasium at Westdale Public School, which in the short term and the long term is going to enhance our organization tremendously. It is finally allowing us to grow in the manner that we can well suit this community and its 55-plus-year-old members. That's one of the big coups this year. And the second is we brought back the seniors town bus 2 days a week. It runs Tuesdays and Fridays. And we are going to work diligently to make sure that that program also expands going forward. Currently, it runs very well because it's catered kind of like a taxi service. And that's nice for the regulars that take it, but that doesn't serve our community equally. So we have some work to do there, but it is a good service and we're getting very positive feedback. So we also are very happy to have brought back this year on September 24th, Saturday coming up, In a couple of weeks, we have our Home and Garden Tour. That is our single greatest fundraiser, and that's going to generate, we're already in the black on that one. It's a very popular fundraiser, and that's going to generate some well-needed cash. So in order to move forward, it was incumbent upon me as a businesswoman to look at what the recent history was, and I saw some definite attrition, which we got to work very quickly to stymie. And that is basically depending on the current restrictions of facilities that we have. For those of you who may not know, we are at the Westdale Public School. We are partnered with VON in that facility, and the current use of space just would never meet the demands going forward of an aging demographic of this community. And we all know that a lot of people are looking to Napanee, greater for many reasons, to be retiring here. So your neighbors, your relatives, your friends, all of us here, 55, except Jessica perhaps, 55 plus, this is something that's cornered, well, sorry, John. This is something that is going to be serving this community very well with programs, social activities, and now with the inclusion of our gymnasium, I plan to introduce movie nights, community dances, pickleball, badminton, all kinds of things that we didn't have opportunity for before. And we can meet the needs. Currently, we have a lot of waiting lists for our existing programs, and that would have killed us. So it's very positive going forward, and you have the handouts for this year and the next 5 years. That takes into consideration our growth going forward. But as you are well aware, that's a partnership. We can't grow without the support. Every town of our size and larger has a seniors community center. We happen to be the only game in this town. And we have a lot of pride because the members that we serve, they deserve our help and they deserve our support in our programs in order to keep them independent and staying in their homes longer. That is what we do. We can only do that by constantly looking at the ways that we can better serve the demographics, the ethnic backgrounds, the needs of the community. So I'm looking at things like putting on work sheds, creating community gardens. Our horseshoe pits are almost finished. Those are some of the things that we're looking at. But none of that is realistic if there isn't support from our municipality. And what is required is giving you the sense of what our numbers look like so that you can look at your budgets going forward to support us with your 20% financial commitment on that basis. So, and it's explained here, we plan to add 1 or 2 part-time people. Currently, there's only 2 of us. We run with an operating budget of just shy of $180,000 right now, managing over 350 members. So we do a lot, and we rely on help of our volunteers and our volunteer instructors, because as a nonprofit, of course, we have a limited budget. So that's kind of where we're headed, and I would just open it up if anybody has any questions about our programming.
Thank you, Diane. Questions from council directed at Diane? Okay, I certainly have some. Diane, I see here with the budget summary, we're listing expenses, but if I'm missing something, I don't see anything with any kind of revenue expectations. And I know that you get grants from different levels of government. Certainly your fundraising, user fees. Is there any way that we can get that sort of information as well?
Our main source of revenue comes from the provincial government. It's called the SALC, Annual Provincial Grant. That is also dependent on that 20% support from the municipality. If it's not provided, that grant goes away. So that is the backbone of our funding. It's the only funding that we're guaranteed. The rest is funding that comes to us through community foundations, support from local partnerships, and again, we get donations from the public. We have our user fees, we have our annual membership, but we have to keep it extremely low because a good portion of our membership is on fixed income. So we can't charge them what a commercial facility would. I mean, our annual memberships are $35 a year. Most of our programs are either $3 or $5 to participate. Now, that might sound grossly outdated, but I tell you, a lot of those members struggle, so that we have to keep them nominal so that it is attractive for them and encourages them to join. We are going to look at additional fundraising next year now that we're coming out of COVID. We plan to have our committee look at different opportunities for fundraising. But yeah, currently our grants, I'm not hesitating, it's just they're haphazard. It's whenever it comes up as an opportunity, I just go and apply for it. We were kind enough to get from the retired teachers this year $3,500 that supported the development of our horseshoe pits. Community Foundation helped us with about $4,000. That also supports our senior center without walls. That's a very important program because we can't just service people that are able-bodied. We have to consider people right now that are isolated, wheelchair-bound, and can't come to us. So we're being creative with programs to ensure that we get to them.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Worship. So it doesn't clarify exactly the 20% in dollar value. So it's 20% of the 180,000?
20% is legislated by the SALC or the provincial government as 20% of the annual operating budget.
All right. And that's been consistent for many years?
Yeah. Since the SALC, the provincial grant, when they brought that in the 80s, that's what it was. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Is it 20 or 20?
That way.
Well, that's good to know. I'm glad I'm not in the audit business because it actually goes down to 5,000 from 7,500. So.
The auditing, yes,
Yeah.
because there is a new opportunity for us. The audits in the past were done because of the instability of the office and the organization itself. So the auditors have to sift through a lot of files. We have recently found that we qualify as a nonprofit charitable organization with revenues currently less than $500,000 to have a good majority of the audit process waived. So we're working diligently with Welch LLP, our auditors here in town, to get to that end. I was very unhappy when I saw the past numbers of auditing for a nonprofit of this size.
Well, since I'm slightly over the 55 mark, settle down.
And not currently a member, I think.
Not yet. But I really appreciate what you do, and it's very important, and you have my support. The Deputy Mayor thinks it's funny. I think everybody's funny.
Thank you, Councillor McCormack. Most appreciated.
Yeah.
So, I guess, is there anyone else that was going to speak? So I guess the question to be asked is, we of course are through the budget year. A new council will be deciding what programs, not a grant system, but programs will be supported by the future council. I think everybody in the room understands the support that I have for SOS. I am just slightly over 55, so if we're going to get into ages, and don't choke, please, Deputy Mayor. But I would have to say that my suggestion would be, of course, the budget isn't going to be decided by this council. It will be decided by the next council. And I would suggest that anyone coming forward to us for any kind of funding to fit into our structure of budgeting would have to be much more detailed than this. It would have to be, I love the fact that it goes a few years forward, but it also, projected revenues are huge and reasons for rent increasing. I'm not sure that you can answer this question, but and I'm not sure who would perhaps, because I see Mr. Seeley is here with you and I know he's part of the hospital, whether seniors are part of the OHT, the new Ontario health teams that are forming to try, and which yours is certainly all in the healthcare package, if there are any opportunities there. And I guess what I would recommend is that you set up a time to be able to sit down with both the board and perhaps someone from the county, because if you say that you have people that are could be on social assistance, could be very close to the line on being able to afford some of your things, and there's not a darn thing wrong with that. They can benefit from it. I just think that we would need, in my opinion, more information to get support for this, especially on an ongoing basis. I know I have always said that, and I did look to see what Prince Edward County and Belleville and Northumberland and several others have done, and they are partnerships. Some of them run their own, but some of them are partnerships. So that would certainly be my recommendation, but I'm happy to hear from what the rest of council would do. It's a very valuable organization that needs to go on, but we have to be responsible to all the taxpayers, and you are LNASOS, even though you are grounded here, and we're very happy for that. Are there funding opportunities through the county as well? So if there's nothing further, I'm going to leave it with you to touch base with Mr. Pinsent to see if we can set up a time to get more details from you. Anything else from council, or do you have anything to respond to what I'm saying?
No.
Okay. Note and receive. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I think you were thinking of the Seniors Care Network, which has been partnering with us, some Ontario health teams.
Yes, yes.
And also, I would just say that this is actually a pretty good time to start talking about it, as we're going to start building the framework for the next
That's
budget,
right.
and it's a good time for our team to be starting thinking about it. So,
Yeah, very,
but
very
I
much
support
so.
your request for more information.
Yeah, and one last question that I see that I did have here. Are there any shared services with VON that you're still able to access, as far as perhaps a receptionist or anything? I know that when it used to be when you were in the back door, and I don't know whether that's where you are now, and I know I'm talking like everybody in the room knows where it is, but at the Westdale campus, the back door of the old school is where you used to go for SOS. Is that where your reception is still?
It is, and we enjoy a really wonderful partnership with VON.
Good.
We're very supportive of each other. We help each other answer that front door. They're not in a position to have a full-time staff. They do have volunteers part-time at the front door, as do we, but very rarely. So, yeah, but we don't have any other shared programs with them.
So certainly there is, they're great members of the OHT as well. Going forward, any of those home health care are. So with that suggestion from me to you, and it will be on you to try and set it up if you would please, I would take unless there's anything further from council, I would take a motion to note and receive. Councillor McCormack, Councillor Norrie, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you for coming forward tonight, and thank you very much for keeping this organization going. I hope that we can do something to make sure that it does keep going forward. Thanks so much. Next would be for the deputations, Morningstar Mission, Mr. Alkenbrack. Good evening, Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor Isbester. and council for this time and this opportunity. So again, I am Kevin Alkenbrack, and I'm the Executive Director for Morningstar Mission. So I've just prepared something that I'm going to read. Usually I talk off the cuff, but we only have 10 minutes. My purpose in addressing council this evening is to try to build a funding model for the Warming Centre. Morningstar has been drawn into the complex world of the unhoused because our programs have always focused on trying to build community for those experiencing poverty. We've done it traditionally through breaking bread together. However, in 2018, after the Homeless Symposium, the Overnight Warming Centre was created in response. Morningstar has been tremendously successful in leveraging the community support with their time and talent and treasure to help build Morningstar into what it is today. We are a county-wide mobile takeout meal program. We are sit-down community meals. We're evening drop-ins. We are clothing and food bank services. We are shower facility, a full income tax program for low-income individuals and families. We provide a furniture program, which council has graciously supported with the use of the train station. Our doors are open Monday to Friday from 9 to 4 to receive those who we serve and anyone else from the community that would like to connect with us. However, an overnight warming centre requires resources that are larger than Morningstar should be expected to shoulder. We are seeking a partnership with council to help Morningstar sustain the warming centre. This year, the final remaining space at Morningstar freed up with the departure of the Rebecca Lodge. We are now renovating that space to create a long-term home for the warming centre in the winter and a functional space to address the needs of the community for years to come. County of LNA maintains a homeless by names list that currently sees around 84 names of self-declared homeless individuals in LNA County, of which many would spend much of their time in Napanee. Our own experience from last year's warming centre showed 437 overnight rest pods assigned to 48 unique individuals from late December until the end of March. It is very taxing on all involved in trying to address the lack of affordable housing with few mental health resources, rising homelessness, increased substance abuse and addiction issues, and very low income levels for single adults who are accessing Ontario Works, which provides $733 a month, or Ontario Disability Support Program, which is $1,169 per month. With all these pressures, many more will struggle to sustain an apartment or a boarding house room. We've only to look at Kingston or Belleville to see our future. Those communities are in crisis. And to be honest, Morningstar doesn't even have any assurance of any funding support for next year. We've received confirmation from the county to have support of $100,000 to help with operation costs for this winter's warming centre. There is no secured funding for next year, and warnings from the county that the funding stream that they have accessed this year and last year is unlikely to be available next year. Morningstar is faced this winter with footing the infrastructure costs to make a feasible home for the warming centre. We need to build a washroom, vestibule, kitchenette, do flooring. So I provided a budget for the warming centre which totals about $250,000. We have secured $100,000 from the county to cover basic staffing and management costs for the warming centre. Last year we were able to open on December 17th and we ran until March 31st. Our open hours were 8:30 p.m. until 7:30 a.m. Naturally, our goal is to expand the open hours of the warming centre. It is difficult for staff and individuals when people are put out at 7:30 in the morning into frigid weather. So it must be stressed that the renovations must be completed before the warming centre opens, and we will need to replenish the money that we spent on warming centre renovations. If we had funding that we could count on, then Morningstar could complete its renovations and focus on sustaining our many important programs and services. Addressing homelessness requires leadership and partnership with government. Morningstar has put ourselves in a position to be part of the solution with the warming center. We can build the relationships necessary to bring people off the couches and off the street. We can hire the staff, we can recruit volunteers, and we can bring the power of the whole Morningstar operation. But who will help us find the money to operate the warming center? Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Council, comments, questions, ideas? Go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Kevin. I know you're gracious enough to have me down and do a tour of your facility not that long ago. And I see, and from hearing from you, there's a commitment of $100,000 from the county. One thing I did learn down there was that your center, your facility reaches far beyond the borders of Napanee. Are there any considerations or thoughts to reach out to our neighboring municipalities to as well help? I mean, this type of thing is something that needs to be done, I think, in conjunction with other municipalities as well, because I was really surprised how far-reaching you were, especially into Loyalist Township, into the town of Deserano, and possibly into Stone Mills and Addington Highlands. So if I may give you a suggestion is that this is something that needs to be done both in conjunction with the county as well as our neighboring municipalities, and maybe we can make this work. But I thank you for the work you do, and like I say, I was really amazed at how far-reaching your organization does go. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor McCormack.
Your Worship, Kevin. So we were in Ottawa about 2 months ago, and it's difficult to walk through the streets of Ottawa with all the poor people that are living on the street underneath bridges and so on and so forth. And I've always had a bit of the concern that, and this, I don't want this to come off wrong, but the more that a municipality does, the more you will attract, right? So I maybe have a comment from you on that. And I just had a thought that maybe the town could consider, because this isn't going to go away and we're going to be back next year looking for funds again and so on and so forth, maybe through our building permit process, we could have or consider or look into having some sort of a tax levy, small amount that would be added to every permit, and this money could be designated directly for supporting this kind of program. Just a thought. And maybe Michael Nobes, Paul Dauber, and people like that could look into it. I don't know how many building permits we've issued this year and what it would be if we charged a nominal fee, $25 or whatever, and multiply that on an annual basis. It might be something to consider. But maybe, Kevin, if you could kind of address the issue of, as I said before, the more you do, then we seem to attract more. That's what I see in Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, places like that.
So I think one time when I was at a conference and a fellow from Vancouver, he shook my hand and he said, "I forgive you." And I said, "Oh, you forgive me for what?" And he said, "Well, I live in Vancouver and I see a lot of homeless people from Ontario. And it feels to me that people in Ontario haven't really addressed homelessness. And so a lot of your homeless have come to my city." And so I often remind people that when we don't address homelessness, then basically we're asking Kingston and Belleville and other municipalities to shoulder our people. And we often think of it the other way around. And we worry about whether people from outside our community will come here. Well, the reality is that the expectation is that our people who fall into homelessness will go to other communities. And so other communities don't bill us for when we send them to Kingston and Belleville. And you just have to go to Kingston and Belleville and speak to people who do this kind of work to understand the kind of crisis that they're in. And so, I mean, there's lots that could be said, but the reality is that a homeless person is all of our concern. And so I have been blessed to speak on their behalf, humbly, to come here and just remind people that it doesn't matter when you're homeless, right? Then whose are you, right? Because everyone can punch you around and say you're not ours. So.
Okay, that's great, thank you.
Okay. So does anyone else want to say anything? Okay. It is something that we're going to have to look at for the future. It's not just today, it's not just tomorrow, it's going to be forever. Kevin, the services that you offer down there, I know that you want to extend the time in the mornings instead of putting them out. Are you able to attract social services? Are you able to get addictions and mental health? Have you had a good result with them coming in to help out with people that need the help?
So I suppose that the answer to that is that homelessness work requires years of investment because we're dealing with a population that is used to dodging services, I suppose is the way to say it. And so to expect that just because we have a warming center and that people are staying overnight there, connecting them to services requires trust that takes years to build. And so we did have success having a warming center manager focused on things. Yes. and being able to provide, like helping to stick handle services coming to the facility made a big difference. But it provides, like, you know, a morning or two, right, where they come in. And oftentimes when one person is in, you know, servicing an individual, then they're kind of, you know, they're not able to do anything else. So it does help to provide a body in the room, though. There's no doubt about it.
That was the answer that I was hoping you would give out so everybody would hear it. I'm going to ask you a very direct question. Is a warming center going to be all you'd ever look at, or do you think that this area, whether it's Lennox and Addington, whether it's Greater Napanee, is at the point where they are looking at a homeless shelter, which would be a 24/7, 365-day organization?
So I would say that we don't, so I would say that we are probably in a position when I see, I often say that affordable housing looks like $800 to $1,200 for a room in a boarding house. I don't know, you could ask the county how many people are on Ontario Works, but I suspect it's a lot. So if a bedroom with a shared kitchen, you know, is say the average of $1,000 and people are making $730 or $1,200 on ODSP, you can well imagine that the trouble is just coming. So I often say that we're on the front end of the tsunami, and it's not that it's coming, it's here. How deep and far-reaching it's going to be, only time will tell, but I do say that anybody who wants to see what our future looks like only needs to go to the neighbors to the east and the west and ask what is happening there. And that right now our people are in the bushes and out of sight. I'm not sure for how long that will remain.
I know this deputation's only supposed to be 5 minutes, but I think this is something that we're going to face it with, so with our 10 minutes, but I'm going to ask for some indulgence here. Kevin, the renovations for upstairs for the warming center, and this is in the old Independent Order of Foresters Rebecca's Lodge. Those things have to be done before the warming center can open. I'm seeing that for $48,500.
So the renovations have to be done because we can only afford to have 2 staff on in the building.
Yeah.
And so that means that we cannot have these complex individuals have a staff take them somewhere else in the building to the washroom. So we don't have plumbing up there, so we have to have a kitchenette. And so there's much work that has to be done, including access to the door that's there. It's just some metal stairs.
Yeah.
So we're prepared to as a charity, we are very blessed at Christmas to receive a big injection from the community. So that allows us to front the money, but then it's incumbent on me and the rest of us to figure out how to build, bridge those gaps. And so one can imagine that carrying this meal program across the county, which is a wonderful program and something we dreamt about, but it takes this, a significant portion of our money. And as we count on the county to also help us with the warming center, then we end up not asking the county to help us sustain this meal program which we carry. So just remind everybody that everything that Morningstar does is carried by the majority of individuals and families and businesses in Napanee that support us with donations. It's really just the warming center that we look for partnership and funding outside of our donor base.
Okay. And that is one of the most important parts to get going right now. Even in the future, I think that we are going to be, if we're not there already, that certainly a bricks and mortar spot to operate from, as some of the municipalities around us. Not that there aren't problems, but I'm not going to be here to decide this. I'll be here hopefully to support it. So going forward, I guess we're not in a position to just, sorry, maybe Councillor Johnson is. Go.
No, I'm not. Finish your thought, Mayor, and then I'll ask my question.
We're not in a position, of course, going into budget that we can promise you the 48,000. I think that it would have to be, you have brought forward a good, concise ask for it, which certainly helps us. But I think we're going to have to put you to staff to see what can be done and what other places that we could perhaps find funding or help with funding as far as reaching out to other areas. And I do agree with the recommendation here that even Desirado, I mean, nominal amounts would help, and lots of the stuff that you need may be in kind. I know that there are lots of people on and off your board that certainly help you achieve some of these things. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. With the ask, and I was going to say the same thing, it definitely will go to budget, and we need to find a way to be able to help this part of our community, or if we can help it. Is it beneficial to you if we make a donation this year and there's nothing next year, or are you looking for something that is going to be consistent for several years in a row? Because that makes it a very different question when it comes to budget negotiations.
The warming center has always been fledgling because we are always dealing with the upcoming funding of the warming center. And so I think we saw quite a large, like bringing the warming center under our roof, and I think unfortunately that difficulties are increasing for the people that we serve. So I think that, the idea that we would just continue to not have a plan year after year would be very difficult for us. And so, yes, the ask really is to try to put ourselves in a position that we would have some support at the municipal government level. I know we're 2 tiers, and that county has been supportive of the warming center, but it's really it just gives us just enough to get the doors open, and so we need to. So obviously, Morningstar feels the pressure from the community. We do cast a big shadow. We attract a lot of money and a lot of resources and time and talent from the community. So I feel, as the executive director, that we must grow and change to service the needs of the community. So the ask for sure is, I mean, obviously we have to address the costs of renovations. I'm going to have to figure that out. At the same time, but I have no assurances of any kind of funding going forward, and that's unfortunately has been sort of the history of the warming center.
Okay. Kevin, thank you for this. I am going to suggest that within the next week to 10 days that you arrange to have a sit-down with the people that Mr. Pinsent would appoint to do, to help you through. I don't know whether you had any help from the Atura Fund. Of course, I don't even know whether there's money left in that for this term, but there will be for the next term. And I don't think that it is ongoing or sustaining. But I would ask that you do that. Again, thank you to what you do, and thank you to all the people down there that do it. We do need to find a solid way to not fix it, but make sure that we can get through it, and every municipality, large and small, is struggling with the same thing. Just not every municipality is as lucky to have an organization like Morningstar Mission that certainly does it without saying a thing, and I thank you for that. Sorry, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. One last thing, Kevin, as you prepare for an upcoming discussion, I know you can't put a target on revenues coming in, but you know the county's got the promise for this year coming up. So I think it would be helpful for decision-making on every front if you could sort of target funding at different levels to cover the total cost. You know what I mean? So it helps clarify the ask rather than just say, throw what you can at us, and then at some point you don't really know where it's all coming. You know what I mean? Like if you try to put some kind of a crystal ball based on past year's experience and whatever, that I just think that would help to generate some kind of picture of where the revenue is coming from, and it helps clarify the ask.
Okay.
Okay. With that, I would take then, again, thank you, Kevin, a motion to note and receive Kevin's deputation. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor Johnson, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to go with Mr. Hogle's deputation next, and then we do have a staff member that has been good enough to bring their report forward this evening, who is in a bit of a childcare problem. So I'm going to have him follow Mr. Hogle's deputation. Andrew, I'm going to let you go after Mr. Hogle's deputation, okay? If that's okay with council?
If you could speak closer to the mic.
Oh,
please,
me
when
even?
this is on.
Oh, okay, when that's on.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Hogle, please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, for hearing me, and thank you for council for listening. I'll be brief. You have a lot on your agenda tonight, and I'm not going to simply read what I wrote in my deputation. You have my 3.5-page deputation. I think it's clear.
Mr. Hogle, could you just pull the mic just a little bit closer?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
And I think I've set out the facts correctly in my deputation as to what happened and how we ended up in the situation we're in with the garbage contract. I was bothered at the time in 2019 about the way this was handled, the way it was presented, and I know that some of the council expressed concern about the fact that this had been brought in and presented to council at the last minute, so there really wasn't much choice to do a rush renewal of the contract with Waste Management, and it ended up being renewed for 10 years at 2.5 times what we had previously paid, and that's shocking in itself. There was very little input from the council itself. It was handled all at the staff level with just a blanket authority from the council, and really I don't think you had any choice but to do that at the time. We're now in this, have this contract. The council didn't see the contract until I sent my deputation. I understand you now have a copy of the contract, which is one of the things I requested. I have a portion of the contract, but I don't have the guts of it, which is so what the escalation clauses are. And I don't know what options there are for saving money here. I see some options for saving money through a number of processes. Obviously, diversion would save money, but we don't know how much, because we don't know how much the tonnage charge is or how it escalates or what basis for the escalation. And there's no way of knowing that. The amazing thing, I was amazed to discover the contract has a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. NDAs are used in a number of situations. We've used them in contracts, terminations here, and in different situations, they're used by American presidents, and they're also used by Waste Management of Canada Incorporated, apparently to prevent the public from finding out what's in the garbage contract. There it is. I'm not here asking for any money. I'm trying to help this municipality save money. And I think there are savings here from a number of sources. First of all, the work that's being done by the Waste Diversion Committee. I've been to 2 of the meetings of the Waste Diversion Committee. They're doing good work. And I think there are savings there, and I think the public could be brought on board on saving money by having it explained to them, yes, for every ton we save, we're going to save this much on the tax bill. We're going to reduce our taxes, but I don't know what that amount is. And Waste Management won't let me know, and they won't let EU even tell the public what the savings are. There's a couple of other areas for savings. As far as I could see from the portion of the contract that I was provided, there are savings to be made for the roll-off containers and the dumpsters that you have at different buildings around town. You have dumpsters at all of the different public works buildings and so on, and they're emptied by Waste Management, and so far they have had the exclusive right to do that. But as far as I can see from the contract, the portion I've been provided, that can be retendered. I provide dumpsters at the Campbell House. I provide a 6-yard cardboard dumpster and an 8-yard garbage dumpster, and they're emptied twice a week. About a third of the garbage in the garbage dumpster is mine. The rest is put in there by scofflaws. We just toss it in there in the middle of the night, and I find it's there in the morning, sometimes in the dumpster and sometimes out in front. There's an old chair up front now that I'm going to have to probably throw and take out to South Fred at some point. This is what people do, this is what I'm finding, and this is what we're finding all over town. I don't like it, but I am determined that my yard, at least my part of the world, looks good, and I do my darndest to keep it that way. I shopped around for dumpster provider. Having gone through Canadian Waste and being very disappointed with the service, I went to Manco, which was a local firm. They were taken over by a big firm called E360, and they sent me a contract with a lot of fine print in it. And given my profession, I read the fine print, and I discovered they wanted me to sign a 5-year contract, and I told them to take a hike. I signed up with another private corporation out of Ottawa, which has a branch office in Napanee, which is aggressively pursuing dumpster contracts. I know that. And they gave me a much better deal, much better price, good service, and I've been very happy with them so far. I'm in about 9 months into a 2-year contract. It's only a 2-year contract. I think you would save money by retendering the dumpster pickup and the roll-off containers. There's a third area where I think you can save money here, and that's what I'm here for. I'm not asking you to spend money, I'm trying to save you money. That is the roll-off containers that you have at South Fred and at Brough. And I mentioned this to Mr. Dafo at one of the meetings. I think there's the question becomes, why do we keep the Roblin, why do we spend the money to keep the Roblin facility open? It costs money to have people back there supervising it, and of course it costs money to remove the waste from there. And I was astounded to find out recently where the waste from the Roblin facility went. I think I've told a couple people in the room where it went. It actually is not taken to Cornwall like the rest of the waste. It's just trucked a mile down the road and left at the facility, the Nyberg's facility, a mile south of there. So the question is, why do we keep Roblin open when people could simply take it into Nyberg's facility? I know it's closed right now because they had a fire, but it will reopen. They have a much better facility. You can just drive up and toss the stuff down into a pit. You don't have to toss it high over top of the edges of the dumpster. They're open, I think, 6 days a week, not just the 1 day a week we're open. And we could simply tailor the rates at South Fred to correspond with those at Nyberg's facility. Have Nyberg provide the service that's now provided at Roblin. These are things that you can see by just looking at contracts closely and see what the options are. We're tied into this contract for another 7 years, and I don't think there's any way out of it. But I think we need to look around for ways that we can save money on garbage disposal, recycling disposal, The Waste Management Committee is doing just that, and I think they're doing good work. And I think particularly Councillor McCormack, who was instrumental in seeing that we had a waste diversion committee, and he's been there at the meetings. I've spoken to him a couple of times. And that's really all I have to say. I think that that should be looked at closely. I'd love to see what's in that contract and see what other things I can find in there where you could save money. I could have gone to the Privacy Commissioner to appeal the refusal to give me the contract. I might have got it, I might not have. But what I plan to do in the new year, after we get the election out of the way, after the clerk recovers time to, I know she's very stressed right now, and her assistant is with the election, and all people in that position are. So when, after Christmas, I'm going to ask like another Freedom of Information request for the invoices. There's 36 of them by then, one each month for 3 years. And I might be able to reverse engineer this and figure out how those extra charges, those surcharges are added in, the tipping charges, and whether they're simply passed through or whether there's an inflationary increase. In the contract I had with Canadian Waste, there was a fuel surcharge based on fuel costs. So fuel costs, as you know, for diesel has gone through the roof, and I don't know whether that's being passed on to. I don't know what's in there. I don't know what the options are. So I think that you know, because you've got a copy of the contract, but you're not allowed to tell anybody else. That seems crazy, but there it is. So I just wanted to bring this to the attention of council. I've been trying to help you save money. The people in Napanee save money. That's what I've spent considerable time doing. And I'd be happy to take any questions, and thank you for listening.
Go ahead, Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Worship. Hubert, thanks for coming tonight. The Waste Diversion Committee has, as you know, a very strong group of not just staff members, but as well the residents that came forward to work on the committee. We have a really diverse group of people that are some experts in waste management. And we have identified a few things. One was the fuel issue. We looked into the contract, and what I know is that Waste Management did not have a contingency in the contract to be able to come back and increase their rates based on the additional cost of fuel, which I think diesel touched close to double at one point. And we have seen recently, because it's got to break somewhere, service to me is not as good as it was a couple of years ago before the pandemic, when the cost of fuels and so on. We have continuous complaints, and I know it's being addressed as much as possible, but I just want to say I appreciate you coming out, bringing it forward. We are restricted to a certain degree on what we can talk about tonight, but we have experts here, and maybe those people could make a comment or two about it. So.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the work that you've done on it too. I've said that. So I think everybody here is motivated to save money on waste. And we have one of the things that I think we also need to look at is, do we have the option of something other than the bag tag system? For example, something that like Kingston does. I don't know whether that's permitted under the contract or not. Maybe we're locked into this bag tag system, because there's a lot of commentary about how this is contributing to garbage being tossed into ditches or places, and in my case, dumped into my dumpster. Right now, it's only half full, but I have another week and a half to go before it's dumped again. And I'm sure there's probably somebody down there now throwing something into it who's not allowed to. There's no way to, if I lock it, they'll just leave it in front of it.
Anything else from council? Thank you, Mr. Hogle, for bringing this forward. I think you're assured that each and every one of us that are sitting here now, and those that will be sitting here later, this is one of the biggest things that we have to tackle.
Thank you.
Got to be a good way to solve it. Thank you. I would take a motion, please, to note and receive Mr. Hogle's deputation. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor Richardson, all in favor of that motion. Motion is carried. Thank you. On to adoption of the minutes for the regular session of Council, August the 9th. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor McCormack. All in favor of that motion. Motion is carried. Thank you. I'm going to go on now to 6.2, please, Andrew, and thank you for being so patient with us, and thank you for having such good kids that are sitting back here waiting for you.
It's actually 10.8 this first.
Oh, you're 10.8, yeah, but it was just to follow on with the 6.2. Okay. All yours.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. I appreciate you moving me up in light of my children being past their bedtime now, and I have to deal with them in the morning without my wife again today as she's away. So just quickly, it's a pretty straightforward report. I'd just like to start by thanking Councillor Richardson for bringing it to staff's attention that we had some buoys that had come unlatched this spring, and we were able to get on that through our third-party contractor and get that fixed prior to the walleye season. I hadn't been down the river yet, so I'm glad that that was brought to our attention. Basically, through inspections of the buoys below and above water, we found lots of deficiencies. And in order to fix those, we had to use the entire reserve fund that we received back from Quinte Conservation. However, the buoys are now in good condition. The stickers are all new in them, and we have a plan for maintenance moving forward to take care of them within the budgeted fee, but considering that we went well over the budget and used the reserve, a report needed to be brought back to council.
Okay. Council, comments or questions to Andrew? Go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Andrew. I mean, we're $3,000 over. I mean, I'm a little disheartened at the fact I'd like to suggest we bought ourselves a lemon when we got these things, but we really didn't. We inherited it. So, and I know we've had this conversation in the past, but I think it's imperative that we keep knocking on the doors of our provincial and federal partners and say, listen, you know, we're not responsible for street signs or highway signs or speed signs on the 401. Why are we responsible for these buoys up the Napanee River? Especially when you get to the mouth of the river, then all of a sudden the federal government's responsible for them. So I'm glad to see that they are in good shape now. I mean, I think we're back to zero. Unfortunately, we're probably going to have to maintain them for the foreseeable future from what I can see. But I think we need to keep knocking on doors and keep asking people as to why this has become a municipal responsibility and a federal body of water. So, but thank you for your work, and it's nice to see them in the spots that they're supposed to be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further from go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, through your worship. Andrew, thank you very much for this this report. People listen to me talk all about this natural beauty that we have that runs right through our town, and how I always mention that if you have the right boat from our town dock, you can go anywhere in the world. I'm very ecstatic that the buoys have been looked after. There's been a lot of work to them, as you've put in your report. So hopefully going forward, we don't have to spend that much money next year or in the foreseeable future, which is great. One thing that we still need to do is to have the river scan, which I'll look forward to that when we have that in the budget and go from there. But thank you very much for this, and it's nice to see that we have the confidence now in our river as well. I'm just wondering if in the future, it doesn't have to be now, but maybe in the spring or something after report, if we could put on our website, did you know this and this and this have been done, just so that if there is any tourists coming in and searching about our river and just give them the confidence that they can navigate as well and expect a 3-foot minimum type of draft, that sort of thing. With that being said, because as I am an avid boater and I'm out and about and I talk to people and try to get them to come and visit our town, it is a very big concern of theirs because it doesn't show up on some. I see that Navionics now has it a little bit, but it is a big deal. So I thank you very much for your work. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Seeing nothing further, thank you again, Andrew, and thank you for accommodating us and trying to do the childcare as well. And I'm sorry that we've kept them too late. Okay. Recommendation that council receive for information, moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Richardson. If there are no further comments or questions, all in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Permission granted to go home.
Thank you.
So back to now. Correspondence, 7.1, correspondence for information. You have correspondence for information items dated September the 13th, 2022. Council's wishes. Council moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councilor Richardson. Anyone wish to poll or speak to any of them?
I noted that two of them are requests for proclamations. Should they not be under action rather than discussion?
So, through your worship, when the proclamation policy was updated, it included a clause that if council has already approved a proclamation within their term, the clerk can sign off on them and then they just come for information. So those proclamations have been approved because council approved them last September. They're compliant with our policy. If you don't like this way of presenting it, we can go back to the old way.
That's perfectly fine. Just clarification. Thank you.
Yep, okay. So, do I have a mover and a seconder?
Yes.
Yes. All in favor of the motion to receive? Thank you. Motion is carried. Correspondence for action. Correspondence for action from Christine Brough, reapplication for exemption to noise bylaw. Madam Clerk, do you wish to speak to this?
No, your worship, no comments to add on this.
Okay. Council, any questions of Madam Clerk regarding this noise exemption? Seeing none, you do have a recommendation before you. Yep, move staff recommendation to approve by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. No unfinished business this evening. Committee reports. Waste Diversion Committee report. Good evening, Christy. Yep, you go ahead whenever you're ready, Christy, please.
Okay, so as you're aware, our Waste Diversion Committee was created earlier this year. Our committee is comprised of 9 individuals from various backgrounds, all with the same common interest of improving our waste diversion rates within our community. We have 1 municipal council representative, 3 members who represent town staff, and 5 members from within our community. And we are proud to note that we often even have members from the public attend and engage in our meetings. So after the creation of our committee, we split up into 4 smaller subcommittees to review these 4 topics. So we looked at our waste disposal sites in more detail, curbside collection, waste alternatives, our household hazardous waste disposal, and the disposal of leaf and brush materials. So the general requirements of these subcommittees was to review things like service levels, identify opportunities for improvement, perform cost-benefit analysis, note innovative solutions, and ultimately develop high-level recommendations for the rest of the committee to review and ultimately propose to council. So the subcommittees put together presentations, and there were a total of 24 recommendations that came out of these. 9 of these recommendations we feel can be addressed through education and outreach. And they revolved around things like reducing recycling contamination, improving our waste diversion rates, and ultimately preserving our only active landfill. A topic of major concern for the committee is recycling contamination. This occurs when materials that are not recyclable are included in the recycling, or more commonly, when recyclable materials aren't rinsed properly, leaving food and other waste products mixed in with the recycling. It typically leads to entire bags or even entire loads of recyclables having to be disposed of as waste. So over the past 5 years in our community, we have disposed of over 120 tons of recyclables that went as recycling but ultimately had to be thrown out as waste, ultimately hindering our waste diversion numbers. So we need to do our part to help reduce the volume of recycling contamination, which we feel can be done through mostly proper education and outreach to our residents. We are recommending targeting specific audiences with tips and reminders in things like our waste collection calendar, updating the waste diversion page of our website, and working with our waste contractor and our community and corporate services department to create additional community engagement strategies. So the committee has made the following suggestions to help improve our waste diversion rates. A common recommendation and something we are seeing in a lot of our neighboring communities are giveaway days. So these are scheduled dates in which our residents can put materials to the curb for free in hopes that someone else may want them. There are specific requirements and timelines to ensure that these materials don't linger after the event and are ultimately not left at the curb. And it seems as though other communities have great success with these events. With consultation with some other departments, we're recommending that we schedule one for this fall. And we've, in the purpose of creating this presentation, just set a tentative date of October 15th. Another suggestion was that the town or committee organize themed or community-wide yard sales. Given the timing of this report, it's not likely something that can be scheduled for this fall, but something we can certainly look at for implementation next spring. We feel as though we could improve our waste diversion rates by promoting backyard composting information, updating other pages of our website, and having staff or committee member involvement as requested at various community events or school groups. We've had chats with some members of the public regarding some potential opportunities to engage high school students for various waste diversion initiatives, and we think that if our committee or staff supported that, we could have great success in improving our diversion rates. And our committee agrees that we need to work to preserve our only active landfill, so the landfill at the South Fredericksburg Waste Disposal Site. By improving environmental oversight, so completing in-house waste audits by periodically inspecting the materials disposed of in that landfill before they're covered could help to prolong the life of the site, as well as ensuring that no bagged waste is disposed of in the landfill. So we feel as though we need to reduce the fill rate at the site, and a preliminary idea is the potential of grinding source separated materials. So that would be things like wood waste, furniture, various construction materials. And if we grinded them first and added them to the landfill in a more compact state, we may ultimately prolong the life of the landfill. This idea is just preliminary and does require more research from the committee and staff just to iron out logistics of it, costs, and the environmental compliance approval side of that sort of thing. Other items that the committee would like to do additional research on include minimizing leaf and brush materials at the source. For this, we'd work with the Emergency Services Department to review existing requirements and evaluate and coordinate potential changes that we may be able to make there. Our committee is also recommending that the town explore alternative, more centralized drop-off areas for leaf and brush materials, but this also would require consultation with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks. And lastly, we're exploring the potential of a second household hazardous waste event, or looking at maybe an alternate, more frequently used drop-off location. Again, staff will continue to evaluate and propose an option within the 2023 operating budget presentation for that. We included this slide to give a quick visual of where we're at with community engagement. If you aren't aware, we've created a waste diversion page on the Let's Talk Greater Napanee platform, and we've utilized that for various community engagement to update the community on committee meetings, our findings, and we've started some preliminary surveys. And this slide just summarizes where we're at as a committee and where we're headed. We plan to provide some more detailed information, including costs of various waste services, a financial analysis, and waste volumes at the next council meeting. We feel as though this information will help council and our community engaging our needs as they relate to waste and waste reduction. So our committee will continue to work on education outreach initiatives through the fall and plan to engage our residents in more detailed surveys to help form detailed recommendations, which we plan to present to the next term of council in the first quarter of 2023.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Did you have your hand up as well? I'll go with Councillor Pennell and then Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. Through your worship, thank you, Christy, for the report. With the 120 tons of recycling that needed to go to landfill, who bears the price of that?
So ultimately, we pay for it either way. We would pay for it as a recyclable material or garbage. The costs are quite comparable, but the town does.
The town does, okay. And there's upcoming changes to recycling stuff coming up? How is this going to affect the diversion committee and such?
There is. We're still kind of looking at that at a staff level, where we're coming, but we do intend to update council and discuss at our future committee meetings with kind of what that's going to look like, and maybe we could come forth to council with more of a timeline to explain the way it's going to look.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Worship. I'm quite impressed with the report. I'm quite impressed with the work that the diversion committee is doing. I like the idea of adding an enhanced household hazardous waste disposal, maybe possibly in the spring, and then we got the regular one in the fall that may help try and divert things that, I'll say, inadvertently make their way to the landfill, but we know it doesn't inadvertently make their way anywhere. And Dave touched upon it. As far as the recyclable, the contaminated recyclable stuff that we've noticed or we've sorted out at the 120 tons, are we billed as recyclable or are we billed as garbage?
I would have to double check. I believe it's converted over to waste, so we would be billed as garbage.
Okay, I was hoping you were going to say that. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. Christy, at our landfill site, we take recyclables into bins and we take them off-site. This is permitted under the certificate of approval?
That's correct.
So how does compost not fit into that? If we were to grind and compost the materials on site, and then could we not then remove them off-site as well? I thought we understood in the past that it couldn't because it's not an in and out certificate.
So the composting regulation is separate through the provincial legislation. For a full compost facility, there are very stringent requirements turning over every so often. It would be very labor intensive for staff and probably costly because of that. But no, to answer your question, composting isn't included in our current environmental compliance approval for either of the sites.
Okay, so that's it. I just brought that up anticipating that might be a discussion point for waste disposal or waste diversion committee. Okay, thank you.
Councillor McCormack?
Thank you, Worship. The last hazardous waste day drop-off, I had one compliment from one resident, contrary to the past years where I would have 3 or more complaints. And I didn't attend, but I understand it went fairly well compared to previous years. Not sure why, but that's good news. Also, something that the committee has spoken about that wasn't brought up tonight is incineration. It's still something that's in the back of our minds to try and coordinate with other municipalities around us, and so not to forget about that. And something that I learned, and part of the problem with the recycling ending up in the garbage is peanut butter jars.
Oh.
So it's extremely difficult to clean out a peanut butter jar. You can put it in the dishwasher, it doesn't work. You can scrape it with a spatula, it still don't get everything. And so don't eat so much peanut butter.
I actually have found a solution for that. Don't buy peanut butter in plastic jars, buy it in glass jars, and they're easy to clean. And they will go through the dishwasher. Now just try and find it in that. That's the next one. Or give up peanut butter, which is just unheard of. Anything further from council? Thank you, Christy, for the update. It sounds like things are working well as a whole. Good follow-up to the deputation that we received. I know there's great interest in it, and we've certainly got to do something. I would entertain a motion to receive. Councillor McCormack, Councillor Richardson, all in favor of that motion. Motion is carried. Thank you so much. Nine point two, Municipal Arts and Culture Advisory Committee. You want to speak to it, sir?
I'm going to speak briefly, not specifically to the minutes, but just to draw attention to the fact that September 24th is Culture Days. It covers a few weeks across the whole country, but in Napanee, September 24th is being focused on. There's a agenda to be coming, but there will be events basically down at Conservation Park during the day, or at least are being planned. And this is in conjunction with some other groups who are also doing things in the community on that day. So September 24th is Culture Days in Napanee. I just want to draw attention to that and watch for social media announcements.
Okay, thank you.
Otherwise, motion to not receive.
Motion to receive the minutes from the May the 3rd, moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Pennell. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Community Development Advisory Committee minutes, 9.3. Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the first item here. States that there's an option for using development charges to purchase launches. That would continue looking at other grants. Those launches that are talking about, that was the accessible launches for the kayaks and the canoes, just so that people are not misled in thinking that we have to buy boat ramps or boat launches.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on that? If not, I need a motion to receive and approve. Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Pennell. All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Municipal Arts and Culture Advisory Committee.
Not receive.
Note and receive. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor Pennell, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. We normally would take a break at 9 o'clock. It's 8:49. We're probably going into a lengthy discussion on legislative services, so I am going to call a 10-minute recess, please. So we'll return at 9 o'clock, please. Not yet? Okay, soon. Okay, council is coming out of a 10-minute recess. And I want to back up to, and do a correction here under committee reports, Waste Diversion Committee report. I just had asked for a note and receive on this. But I want to go through the full recommendation so those that are watching us will know. The council received for information the Infrastructure Services, Environmental Services, Waste Diversion Committee report, number 1, and further that the committee provide cost-effective recommendations to council during the 2023 budget deliberations for enhanced household hazardous waste disposal, and further that the committee launch public education and outreach initiatives to target such things as, but not limited to, firstly, reducing recycling contamination, second, improving waste diversion rates, third, preserving our only active landfill at the South Fredericksburg waste disposal site. 4, participate in community events as requested, and lastly, partner with local schools for tours and recycling reuse programs, and further that council approve a 3-month pilot program for community waste diversion events to include activities such as a giveaway day and or community yard sales. So we're going to withdraw the initial recommendation, and I would look for a mover and a seconder on the corrected one, and I apologize for missing it. Moved by Councilor McCormack, seconded by Deputy Mayor Kaiser. All in favor of the correction? Motion to correct is carried. Staff reports, 10.1, legislative services, ATV bylaw, Aggie. Good evening. Thank you, Aggie. I'll let you go ahead with your presentation, please.
I have nothing to add, but I'm available for comments.
Okay, Council. You do have the information before you and the updated report. What does Council want to do with this? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, through your worship. Aggie, I see there one of the options is to approve the proposed ATV bylaw with the extension to County Road 8. So that extension would be right down County Road 8, no ATVs till you get to Little Creek Street. Is that correct?
Yes, the intention was that, with that was just to avoid backtracking of ATV traffic when they get to a certain point, and that just allows an alternate route. The intent of having that extended through down to Little Creek Road was when we had our initial meetings with the few members of council and the ATV committee and everything, we arrived at the conclusion that it would be best to extend that to keep the ATV traffic away from Southview Public School because that crossing is already quite dangerous, and we received several complaints, and we just want to make that as safe as possible by the school.
Right, okay, thank you.
Any other, go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess that extension on County Road 8 would be a recommendation to the county, because the county has to put that into their bylaw as well as fix some of the other stuff in their bylaw in order to make this workable, I guess. Am I correct?
Yes, so in our discussions with the county, they're willing to mimic whatever bylaw we have in place or whatever recommendation we present to them, as long as everybody's on the same page.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I'm just going to throw it out there and see if it sticks. I'm going to move that we approve the proposed bylaw with the extension on County Road 8.
So that's the staff recommendation. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware. So recommendation that council receive for information, and further that council adopt the proposed ATV bylaw subject to the following conditions. The council consider and decide on the merits of written and verbal submissions received up to and including the council meeting, and that if any new information to be received or further input received raise points for further consideration, this report and opinion herein be revisited. and then you've got the staff report. Moved by Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Johnson.
I think maybe the deputy mayor actually moved it, but I was seconding it.
Close
But
enough.
I'm
we'll,
sorry.
we'll
As long as it's
allow
on the
it.
table, I don't care.
No, it's okay. Moved by Deputy Mayor, 3 meetings. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All in favor of the motion.
Usually you have a little more discussion after we first move it, but that's.
Okay, any further discussion?
Just making sure.
Last chance, going once, going twice. Any further discussion? That's why I didn't ask for it. All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm opposed.
Oh, and one opposed, okay. The record show that it was not unanimous, please. There was one opposed. Thanks, Aggie. Appears we've done it. Growth and expansion, development charges, background study. Thank you, Michael. You go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is a follow-up from the public meeting that was held earlier in the summertime there, where the town's development charges consultant, Watson and Associates, provided a detailed overview of the justified rates for development charges. There have been no public comments received since the release of the background report and study, and following the public meeting. Staff have held conversations with our repeat developers to make them aware of the proposed increases that are justified. We've had no pushback. Obviously, nobody wants to pay more, but people certainly understand that increasing these development charges will help to fund capital projects and upgrades to municipal infrastructure, wastewater plants, et cetera. So nothing further to add beyond the final justified rates in the associated report. I would be available for any questions that council might have before contemplating the bylaw.
Council, questions of Michael on the development charges? Go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Just your indulgence for a bit, Your Worship. I have a lot more comments than I do questions, but I've got a lot of stuff here, so
5 minutes.
I'll do my best. I guess I could start by saying the Development Charge Act is quite an act. It really is. I hate to say it, but I actually learned a lot from it, and I actually enjoyed reading it, and I wish I had more time reading it. But thank you. Well, I guess we had no choice, but thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Four minutes.
This is our next mayor.
Just trying to be thorough, Your Worship. Interesting, I'll make a comment first. Interesting, 4.10 in municipal-wide versus area-rated information. It's interesting that the Act mandates us to look at area-rated charging of stuff.
Mike.
Sorry, it's interesting that the province has mandated us that we have to look at it. We don't always have to do it, but it's interesting that the province tells us we have to look at it. I know that area rating is we've dealt with that in the past, and it's just interesting that the province makes us do that. So.
Dare I say 3 minutes?
I'm doing my best, Your Worship. I'm doing my best.
And you know I realize that.
There's a large report.
As Councillor Pennell suggested, yes, it was 200 plus pages, so and made far too many notes. Front-ending agreements, it talks about. Have we got any front-ending agreements within the municipality, or do we anticipate getting any?
At this point in time, we don't have any in place. There may be some contemplation possibly for the Millhouse Yards, stormwater pond. Oversizing those conversations are about to be reinitiated with Mr. Selkirk and the adjacent benefiting landowners. There was the special clauses included in that subdivision agreement where Mr. Selkirk took on all the associated risks, understanding that there may not be any front-ending agreement entered into with the municipality and that he might be required to really pursue those additional costs with those benefiting landowners. But at this time, the only other actually oversizing agreement that we have in place is for the widening of Cherrywood Parkway, so that has been in place for a number of years for that subdivision as it has advanced. Okay. At this time, that's it.
Yep, perfect. And I'm not going to leaf through to find it, but I noticed that there's a chart there with respect to, there's a bunch of different categories with respect to how we spend or how we collect that money. With respect to each of those categories, we have to specifically, I think one of them was, just for argument's sake, wastewater. We have to use, if we're going to spend money from the development charges, we have to use that for wastewater. We can't borrow from this one to use it for that one kind of thing. I think there's bylaw was in there as well. There's a number of different categories, but if it goes in under that category, it has to come out under that category. Am I correct?
By my understanding, correct.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks a bunch.
That's it, okay. Anything else from anyone? And please understand, and Councillor Richardson realizes this, I don't want to belittle anything that you bring forward. You do your homework, you bring it forward. I just wanted to make a little bit of fun of you while I still had the chance.
Your Worship, you're more than welcome to do that. Like I said, I found it very interesting that the Development Charge Act is a very interesting act with a lot of information in there. So
Yeah, it is, and confusing by times too.
At times it is. Thank you.
Okay, you do have a recommendation before you that council receive the Watson and Associate Economists Limited Development Charges Background Study, and further that council, whenever appropriate, request that grants, subsidies, and other contributions be clearly designated by the donor as being to the benefit of existing development or new development as applicable, and further that council adopt the assumptions contained herein as an anticipation with respect to capital grants, subsidies, and other contributions. And further, that council establish classes of services for growth studies and public works. And further, that council continue the DC approach to calculate the charges on a uniform town-wide basis for all services. And further, that council calculate the charges for water and wastewater on an urban area basis. And further, that council approve the capital project listing set out in Chapter 5 of the Development Charges Background Study dated July 14th, 2022, subject to further annual review during the capital budget process. And further, that council approve the Development Charges Background Study dated July 14th, 2022, and further that council determine that no further public meeting is required. And finally, further, that council approved the DC bylaw as set out in the Appendix G of the DC background study dated July the 12th, 2022, and also contained within the council agenda. I took longer than you did. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor McCormack. Comments or questions? Certainly, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Only just a friendly suggestion that as we communicate this going forward, we make sure to include that other charges like the educational development charges are beyond our control and simply have to be passed on. This is one we're still fighting, but my fight's nearly done, but we did fight it again last month in Ottawa, and we'll see how that goes. So just wanted to put that in there, that that's beyond our control, but certainly one we have to collect.
Okay. just as a matter of interest, not as part of not as part of the recommendation here?
No, just.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Growth and Expansion, PLZACO 2022-044, 21 Pleasant Drive rezoning report. Michael.
Thank you, Worship. This application was before council for a public meeting earlier this summer. The comments that were received from the member of the public that were concerns raised regarding the operations of the Lennox fencing site, staff believe are very much able to be addressed through the site plan control application processing, which are primarily surrounding noise concerns, buffering between residential lands, general appearance of the site, et cetera. There are also questions about management of stormwater, how we can incorporate some additional plantings, and ways to overall mitigate the noise impacts that may be perceived off-site. So the noise study is underway. I'm aware of that, and the site plan application is pending. Has not been received at this moment, but it is anticipated to be received shortly, pending council approval of the zoning bylaw amendment. I don't have anything further to add. Staff are supportive of the request and the proposed changes in land use permissions on the what would be the retained lands and the severed lands, as this was previously contemplated and provisionally approved for consent approval from the Committee of Adjustment. Really, this would incorporate those conditions to prohibit any residential use on those lands as well. So, due to the proximity of neighboring industrial uses and the Lafarge quarry operation. So, I don't have anything further, but I would be open to answering any questions that council might have.
Council, any questions? And I think Mr. Sands has come into the, and for this one, has come into the room for this as well. Any questions of council to either Michael or Mr. Sands? Seeing none, you do have a recommendation before you to approve the zoning bylaw amendment subject to the conditions within your agenda. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Johnson. If there are no further comments or questions, all in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. 10.4 has been dealt with. 10.5, CAO, budget deliberations. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to come to council with staff's plan for the budget for fiscal 2023. It's a bit of a different approach given that the budget for 2023 will be approved by the next term of council. And to see if there's any feedback in terms of what those dates look like. We will kickstart the process tomorrow. There's an all-staff meeting, or senior management team will be getting together tomorrow with managers and directors to look at budgets for 2023. We envision the week of September 26th, a half-day session with council, really designed to look at some of the strategic issues facing the municipality in 2023. We'll look at some of the things we saw this evening in terms of budget requests from any municipal organizations. We will be looking at a big ticket item like the waste management contract and how that's funded, and some other things. Understanding that about 75% of our municipal budget in the short term is fixed, so there's very little maneuver areas. So we'll do that in September. Then the week of October 17th, based on any feedback we get from council during that September meeting, we'll come back with a revised version of what we see as another work in progress of the budget for 2023, and then hand that over to the next iteration of council. So we'll have some time to work on that with feedback of council. So I'm happy to take any questions or concerns with what we're looking at as an approach for 2023's budget.
Go ahead, Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would rather not be stuck for half a day twice before the election. I think time is of the essence. The candidates are out there campaigning, and I think would be very restrictive for members of of council that are running to be sitting in half-day budget deliberations. So that's something that I would like to see be pushed to after the election, and that would afford any member that, or any person that was lucky enough to be elected to be included right off the get-go. So just my thoughts. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way.
Council, go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm gonna concur with Councillor McCormack. I mean, we know that this 2023 budget is going to have to be decided by the next term of council. I don't mind starting it and initiating it with at least one meeting, but I think the vast majority of the meeting should be left up to the incoming council. I mean, they're the ones that are going to make the decision on it. I just don't think it's fair to the incoming council to be saddled or to have expected that the outgoing council has done a lot of the heavy lifting on it, because it just seems like we may end up repeating what we've done. So I don't mind starting it and having an initial or a framework to look at it, but I mean, I think the vast majority of it should be done by the incoming council, because they're the ones that are going to make the decision on it. So I concur with Councillor McCormack on that.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Norrie.
Thank you, Worship. I guess I'm simply going to ask Mr. Pinsent, or perhaps Mr. Dauber if inclined. There must have been a vision in proposing this, knowing that we couldn't make the decision and that the new council would go in. Could you, and I think we touched on it at a previous meeting, but could you just expand upon that a bit? What your vision was in doing it this way, knowing that it's actually the new term of council to decide?
Through your worship, I would suggest all of council, because you're all asking me the same thing. Our initial point was to do a lot of the heavy lifting, probably only one meeting of council, and it was suggested we weren't being open enough with this council, and I didn't want to try and do a lot of the work ahead of time. So I'm more than happy to have one meeting. We are going to still have to do the work internally, because it behooves us as staff to be able to make sure that, especially with a new council looking at December, wanting a January budget, we're going to want to come to council with a series of alternatives, with a series of options and different things so that we're not sitting there saying, what would you like to do here, without having the background work done. So we'll continue that work ahead of time. But if you think one is enough, then we'll do one in October and say this is the work that we've done so far, and then present to council some of the options analysis or sensitivity analysis that we would have to work through to get to a budget. Because as we look at it, it's going to be, there's going to be some interesting decisions that are going to have to be made.
So, in follow-up to that then, I mean, I think I understand and agree that having that meeting in October, building the framework for the budget, we might not know exactly how any new councillor might vote, but I think we can anticipate what would be palatable for the electorate as we're representing them, and as the number of you are knocking door to door and hearing from them in the time leading up to that. I think that's the kind of conversation that staff needs to hear coming from us, is that sort of guidance that'll sell and that won't sell, and I think that's appropriate because they are left with a very short timeline following their inauguration in December.
And if I may, through your worship, there's 4 years of experience here in terms of council, right? In terms of what you've seen, I know that Paul's taking you through a journey in terms of making sure you understand what's in the budget, how the budget's constructed, what are those specific components. So I didn't want to simply say, or we didn't, as staff, want to say, we'll push it to the next one. I think there's some experience and some advice in here that we're happy to take as administrative staff from the politicians in the room. So that was what we were offering, but if we want to go to one meeting in October, I'm more than happy to do that. It means less work for us realistically in terms of preparing a presentation, so I'm happy to do that.
Councillor Norrie?
Pretty well been answered, but if we do end up going to a meeting or two, I would ask that it be morning. That would give council, or those running, time to get out there when the normal time is to talk to people. So it'd be a morning meeting, I would ask for half day.
Through your worship, we're just proposing dates in terms of weeks. We can certainly figure that out with the clerk in terms of what those exact timings are.
I'll go to you, Councillor Pennell, and then I'll go to Councillor McCormack, please.
Through your worship, with the meeting dates here, September 14th and almost a month later for October 17th, is there a reason the staff wanted that much time in between? Because as this might not sound correct, but I would rather have one all-day meeting than two half-day meetings, just simply for what we're talking about with canvassing and campaigning and stuff. To me, if I was going to designate a time, I'd rather designate a whole day, and I'm just wondering, was there a reason for such a time frame in between the two meetings?
Through your worship to Councillor Pennell, it was simply a matter of being able to take advice during a half day, being able to do some work on it. So that was the reason for the gap. Looking at the calendar in terms of where council meetings were, what the process was for, you know, the rest of this term of council, those were the weeks that were picked. There's no secret sauce in there, it's just we picked a couple of weeks.
No, okay, thanks. I was just wondering if it took you that much time in between to prepare for the next meeting, and it sounds like you do need some time to take back what we say and stuff, so that's okay. Yeah, I just think that it's bad timing, but it probably can't be helped, so thank you.
Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, it's an awkward time, but anyways, one meeting the week of the 17th would be fine with me. I'd rather not have one the week of the 26th of September. Thank you.
Okay, so somebody put something on the floor here so that we can vote on it as to the direction, so the staff has some idea of what they're doing. The only comment that I will make on it is I do think any new council that I have come in on, whether as council member or as deputy mayor, and then again this year, by the time that we got through the deliberations, it was really close to the time to getting out the bills, which have to go out for April 26th or April 1st or something, isn't it, Paul?
The tax bills go out the end of January and the end of May.
But it's the bylaws and so on, I guess, that we have to get into place.
Would be in April, that's correct.
Yeah. And in no way, shape, or form, publicly and to anyone that's running, is this council is not going to make final decisions on this. But to have the framework to go, I hope that we would be able to help with it, and all kinds of things. You're going to have enough things to look after. If we can get a little leg up on this, it's maybe a good idea. So somebody put something forward here that we can see if it flies. Go ahead, Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move that we have one half-day meeting the week of the 17th of October.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Richardson. Comments or questions?
I'm easy.
So the week of the 17th? Half day, week of the 17th. And so if they're having a meeting, and I'm going to ask this question now, if they're having a meeting September the 14th, then we would want, I'm assuming, as we do with budget deliberations, in any shape or form, that we would get them the week before. Is that a possible thing? A week before whatever the meeting is, so that there can be a lot of questions back and forth, which is almost like having another meeting, because everything gets copied and answers go back to all of council. Okay, I'm going to call a question if that's going to work. All in favor of the motion, one meeting, week of the 17th. Motion is carried. Thank you. 10.6, early vehicle acquisition. Mr. Murphy, welcome.
All right, guys.
I'll let you go ahead, and then you can take questions, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't really have a whole lot to add to this. This is more for just information purposes.
we entered into this agreement late in the summer with Enterprise, and we've had a handful of meetings kind of working through the process with them at this point. This is where we're kind of left. As the report says, we put in an order for 3 of these pickup trucks, and they came back to us basically as we put them in and said, hey, we've had 3 rejections from a single company saying they need different needs for theirs now. Would you guys be interested, because they're essentially the same vehicle, just a year newer. So we just acted on that at this point. So I'm open to any questions if anybody has any at this point.
Any questions directed to Nathan on his report, please? Seeing none, you do have a recommendation to receive. I just want to make sure that I'm getting all of the sorry, it's coming up slow. So receive for information the early acquisition vehicle report, moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor McCormack. If there are no further comments or questions, all in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Community and Corporate Services 2022 discontinuation of Hometown Market. Mr. Zetterberg.
Your Worship, no additional comments.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Zetterberg on his report? Go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just with respect to the paragraph where it suggests that in 2020 COVID-19 resulted in a change in the market to address the foot traffic control of the health unit mandated guidelines, the market was moved to the Strathcona Paper Centre. Could you explain to us what the health unit mandated guidelines were that would require it to be moved from the park to the rink, I guess?
It was the flow traffic through the park. So the additional pedestrian traffic through the park was a concern to the health unit. So there was no control over the number of people moving through. Where at SPC, we could actually control the crowd activity.
So was it vehicular traffic or was it?
People.
It was
Pedestrian.
Just pedestrian traffic.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the report's very straightforward. I'm encouraged by the last paragraph of the report that suggests that staff has recognized the value of returning 124 John Street to its original purpose of a market house. I was hoping, and I know we're in the midst of an election period, and there's a lot of decisions that will have to be made later on, but I'm hoping that we can really follow up on that between now and the springtime to encourage to make this happen, to figure out how we can bring the market back to the market square. I'm guessing that we're probably going to have to start looking at that this early spring in order to make that happen, and I'm hoping that that staff can encourage or come up with some ideas. I mean, I read the report. I know it was a 3-year pilot project that lasted 13 years. But I would really like to encourage or see the market at least examine how we can make that work to bring the market back to the downtown core, to the market square. So I would encourage that hopefully we can do that. So when the next term of council gets running and hits the ground running, we can maybe bring the market back to where I believe personally it should be, which is in the market square. So.
Thank you. Any further? Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick comment. I know that it's been 13 years and there's been a lot of different people who have participated in the market over that period of time, and there have been dissension among some of the people who participated as to where and how it should be handled and where it should be managed. I believe, just as Councillor Richardson said, I believe the market should be in the downtown core, and this would be the perfect venue for it, inside or outside. But it also is not a town event. So the people who participate in the market also need to take some ownership in managing the market. And up to this point in time, they have not been willing to do that. So that is something else that has to come from inside. This is a grassroots organization We lost the name of a farmer's market because we didn't have 50% participation from farmers. So unless the people who participate are willing to help manage it themselves, it will continue to remain just a town event. And one that costs a lot more money and time than people recognize, and is not getting the customer base that it needs to fulfill its needs and move forward. So it's a two-pronged problem. You have people who are not interested in building the community and developing the event, and you don't have enough customers to support the people who are trying to do the event. I don't understand or see how we're going to get past that unless we have people from the community who are willing to step up and accept ownership of it. But thank you for all the work you've done on it.
Thank you. Anything else? It's a struggle, and the markets are changing. I mean, Kingston's gone through a whole morph, so has Belleville. I don't think anybody wants to blame it on COVID, but the fact that, you know, we had to control the number of people that were allowed in the market at a certain time, and that's why it was moved to where it was moved to. I would hope, and I certainly agree with what Councillor Johnson has said, the market vendors themselves need to take responsibility, and I don't mean that in a bad way. They need to be involved so that we're doing what they are needed. I know there's been a lot of talk about how successful Newburgh has been. It's a private entity, and still you couldn't buy a cob of corn or a tomato out there. It's all crafts and you know, honey and things like that, but nothing that I think of as being a market square or market farmers market.
Could I add one more comment?
Certainly can.
I hate to take the last word away from you, but you know, I just want to give credit to the various staff who over 13 years have tried in several different ways in several different locations to make this thing happen, to make it gain a life of its own. I know there's been some back and forth with some of the members of the market, the various vendors who've had ideas and had some interest in taking it to a different way, but you know, I think every change and every evolution was an intent to make it grow to the next level, to get that critical mass that it can suddenly take its own and fly, and it never did. And you know, the perseverance of 13 years for a 3-year pilot shows that there was definitely a desire to figure out a way to make this work. For whatever reason, it didn't. It's nobody's fault. It is what it is. It just, I just want to recognize the efforts of many people, staff included, local vendors included, to try again. And unfortunately, we had to pull the plug. It just wasn't going.
Thank you. No, that finger was just, sorry, I thought I saw your hand go up. So,
Receive.
pardon?
Need a motion to note and receive?
I do need a motion to receive for information, please.
Done.
Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor McCormack, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. We have looked after 10.8. Thank you very much, Mr. Zetterberg. We're on to 10.9, Legislative Services Exotic Animal Bylaw. I don't know whether Madam Clerk has anything to add to this, but what staff are looking for is direction. This came up, I believe, early in our term when there was a problem with something that was termed an exotic animal and that there was no way to control or look after it. Council's wishes here.
I'll jump in with both feet, Your Worship, and I'll suggest that we defer it to the next term of council. I think we've got a lot of balls in the air right now, and we've got to get a lot of things cleaned up. And the reality of it is that this bylaw, which it may be required and warranted, just isn't going to get the attention that it needs over the next 6 or 8 or 10 weeks. So what I'd suggest is that maybe we defer it to the next term of council where it can get its due reward or course as to being looked at.
Okay, so you're making that by way of motion, Councillor Richardson?
I will make that by way of motion, Your Worship. Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Pennell. Any further comments or questions? All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just looking to make sure we're not going over our time, and we just might make this by the skin of our teeth. Bylaws. Is that where I'm at? Yes, it is. Bylaw number 2022-0059 to establish development charges for the corporation of the town of Greater Napanee. Read a first, second, and third time. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor McCormack, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. 11.2. Bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 02-22 as amended PLZACO 2022-004. First, second, and third reading. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor McCormack, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. 11.3 has been looked after. 11.4. Bylaw to regulate, 2022-0062 to regulate the operation of off-road vehicles on municipal highways within the town of Greater Napanee. First and second, and I'm going to go third readings unless somebody wants to do it. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor Richardson, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? One opposed. Thank you. Motion is carried. Bylaw to regulate the operation of municipal cemeteries in accordance with the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act. First, second, and third reading. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor Pennell, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Mr. Pinsent.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before we got to the bylaw to appoint both an interim fire chief and interim deputy chief, I want to make a couple of comments. One is John Koenig is not here tonight, but I wanted to formally thank John for his service to the town of Greater Napanee, and we will make sure we have an appropriate time to celebrate his service to the municipality, his success here, and not forget that he's done yeoman's work over the last couple of years. The second point with respect to John is this is not an easy thing for anybody that wears a uniform in a command position to sort of relinquish the command while he's still here, and to let the new chief, Bill Hammond, sort of take control. And you can't have two chiefs run an organization. It's unity of command, is one guy in charge, so that's now Bill. So John, I want to thank him for being that guy that understands what we're doing. The other thing I'd like to say is to the municipality, this is an example, I think a perfect example of what we want to do as an administration with our staff, in recognizing that when you have talent within, you can actually groom that talent with a succession plan, and when somebody leaves, not automatically go out to the market to hire. So we've had the perfect opportunity to be able to do that with our staff internally. And as a demonstrable success, we now have an interim fire chief and interim deputy chief that we've grown within, and there's some more things that we're going to do within the fire department. So I just want to thank council for your support in getting us there, and the demonstration that we want to sort of make sure that we can keep our talent within the town of Greater Napanee. That's all I have. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. With that, and I'm going to get to say a word here too, and I'm going to do it for both bylaws. Welcome aboard, interim fire chief, interim deputy fire chief. You both have served the town extremely well. Right, I think the right decisions have been made, and I want to thank certainly Chief Koenig for his efforts, and thank everyone involved in emergency services out there. It's been a tough go for the past, well, the whole term between problems and COVID. It maybe hasn't been the most fun time that all of us have had, but you've all made it through, and I'm glad to see the two of you still be a very large part of the organization, so thank you. With that, we have the bylaw 2022-0064 to appoint an interim fire chief. First, second, and third reading. Councillor Norrie, Councillor Pennell, comments or questions? All in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Bylaw number 2022-0065, bylaw to appoint an interim deputy fire chief. Councillor Johnson, Councillor Norrie. Any further comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Worship. On the last one, my hand went up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, because I knew I had a second chance at this.
Okay.
I just want to say congratulations to both, and very well deserved, and look forward to the future. Thank you very much, and enjoy.
Thank
Congratulations.
you. And I apologize for not recognizing you.
No, absolutely.
I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Bylaw number 2022-0066 to provide the remuneration and the payment of expenses for members of council. This one's going to be read a first, second, and third time. Moved by Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor McCormack. All in favor of, sorry. We're going to go, I'm going to go Councillor McCormack, Councillor Pennell, and then Councillor Norrie.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question. After our last conference in Ottawa, there was a discussion that we might be able to facilitate the submission of expense forms, and I'm just wondering if there's any thought to that.
I'm sorry, through your worship to Councillor McCormick, with regards to that conference?
No, just, it was brought up at that time.
Oh, okay.
We've had discussions before that, so I'm just bringing it up if
Okay.
that's something that's going to come at a later date.
I think we can certainly work on that so that it's less cumbersome and easy to manage. Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Pennell.
No.
Oh. Councillor Norrie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just based on some calls I received after people reading this on the agenda, they're very confused as to why looks like we're voting ourselves a raise. So I tried explaining, and maybe the public should be aware that last month we were told by staff that we are the lowest paid, which is fine. They said to bring us up would cost the taxpayer $4,000 this year, $40,000 next year, and we voted that down. So we did not vote ourselves a raise, contrary to what was put in the media. But, so this is based on our contract that we get the same percentage as staff, correct, every year? But it still looks like we're voting ourselves a raise, so it's bad timing, it doesn't look good, so I'll be voting against this. It's just perception. At this time of year, we're voting a raise. Even though we're not, it's leaving bad taste in the public's mouth.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
If I may, I may be overstepping here slightly, but I did just want to point out this is actually a pay cut. If you leave the bylaw as it stands, your raise will be based on the inflation for this year. That's the bylaw that's on the books. This will tie you to the increase that is being given to staff, which is 2.25%.
Instead of 4.8 or whatever the
Whatever the
index
inflation
is.
ends up being at the end of the year. I did just want to put that out for clarification.
Thank you. It just, because of the calls, there was a lot of confusion, and if we're charging less, that's great, and as the public's aware that we voted down to stay the lowest paid, just so they know we're looking after their dollars. So thank you, and I'll shut up.
No, and I don't disagree with what you've said, and what I will ask is when we do put the council updates in, is that's explained, because you're right, the normal person would look at that and think we are doing it. I knew that it was not a pay cut, but it wasn't what we could have increased it to, okay? I have a mover and a seconder. I think so.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? Motion, and opposed? No, we're good?
She answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark.
Staff compensation, bylaw number 2022-0067, staff compensation, to amend bylaw number 2020-0041, which is adopting the salary grid. I'm going to separate this into a first and second reading, get it on the floor, and we'll discuss it. So Move for first and second, Deputy Mayor Kaiser, seconded by Councillor Johnson. Thank you.
Yeah, Your Worship, can I ask, when we get to the voting, we could have a recorded vote on it as well?
Sure.
Thank you.
Any conversation, any comments on first and second reading? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Kaiser.
Thank you, Your Worship. I know that this went out, there was an original version which had some percentages displayed which highlighted some step increases, and due to that and some comments back, there were some questions and there were some answers. And I know Mr. Fisher's online that could answer, but I'm going to speak first and just simply say that this grid represents an established pay protocol, that the grid at the market rate is the highest rate, but that we assume that staff aren't fully qualified when they first come on, or maybe not fully, and so that's why the steps are in there. The steps are not automatic. We now have a developing policy to evaluate performance and qualifications before people qualify for the steps, and that budgetary restrictions may hinder those steps. That the only thing that is really guaranteed in any way, shape, or form is, just like with council, is the 2.25% increase, which was negotiated into a contract. And so these are out there. It's public knowledge that certain staff levels and certain job qualifications have pay rates. And this was a long study to get there and a lot of discussion by us to get there, but there's nothing automatic built into any of this. And I think the public needs to understand and be aware of that the steps aren't automatically awarded every year or every period or whatever, that they're going forward, they'll be earned, I guess, or proven to get there.
Did you wish to comment? Go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Worship. I just believe this bylaw is preemptive, it's preliminary. I, for one, would love to see our staff paid at the level in which this chart or graph is explained or displayed. I just think it's preliminary. I mean, there's changes to the organizational chart or the graph that we've seen in the report that are going to affect, by simply passing this by, that's going to affect the 2022 budget. We know that. It's also a very, very good chance that it could affect the 2023 budget, which we're not here to make a decision on. I just think it's preemptive, it's preliminary. Yes, there's no guarantees, but I mean, the reality of it is that we've never really ever discussed this in open session. It's been discussed in other avenues or other venues, and it shows up tonight as a bylaw. So I just can't support it at this time. I think it's preliminary, and I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Your Worship. What concerns me is that the 2.25%, which is what I had agreed to initially in our discussions, now a member of staff could actually be awarded a 2.25% plus a 4% grid bump. And this could happen during the course of 5 years more than once, could happen twice, 3 times. And that to me is, I'm not comfortable with. So I'm happy to see staff being paid properly, and I'm respectful of the work that's been done through human resources. But this, I'm not comfortable with it, the way it's structured. And myself also, I can't agree with it the way it is. So.
Anything further? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also agree with what's been said so far. I agree that our staff needs to be paid and paid well, but to ask me to make this decision right now at this time, it's not going to happen. I can't support it. I'm sorry. And that's the way I stood on this right from the get-go. So I'm sorry I can't support it tonight.
Go ahead, Councillor Norrie.
I'm not going to belabor it. I just think it's too early for this bylaw. Election year, I want to see the budget proposals, how this is going to fit in there to keep us within our 2.95. I've heard it's possible, but I can't support it till I see it. But I want staff to get paid, yes, but I got to protect the taxpayer too. So if I see more when this is going to happen and how it fits in with this budget, staying how we've felt, maybe the next council will be different, that's fine, but at this present time, no, I can't support it.
Go ahead, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a few phone calls from people who read the initial documents and were very upset because they were thinking there was guaranteed pay raises for the next 5 years. I think there is a misconception in the community as to how this chart works. Although it is only an updated version of what the town worked with previously. I do believe the chart needs to be updated. I don't have a problem with the way this chart is set up. And people, whether they work for a union or they work for a municipal organization or they work in private enterprise, they deserve to have a structured grid that they can understand and they can see what their progression can be in their job position. Our staff is entitled to that as well. I think there was, with the previous grid, there was a lot of confusion as to how people could move through the grid, and sometimes there were timelines attached to it. There have been, not here, but in other places, union contracts where, like, if you've been there for 5 years, you automatically get a raise. If you've been there for 10 years, you automatically get a raise. The intention, as I understand it from Michael, is this is based on skills and accomplishments within the organization, which is where it should sit. It should not be just, I put in my time and I get a raise. People deserve to be rewarded for the extra effort they put in to do their jobs better. And if they're happy with just being at an entry position and staying there, they should be allowed to do that as well. I don't agree with assigning dollar values and changing people's wages prior to the budget, but the document as a structure for how we're going to move forward, I believe is a good document. And I don't think we were being asked tonight to move people around in steps and give people raises. I think we were just being asked to approve the document and the structure, and then where people sit in this document and structure is part of a budget discussion. And if I'm wrong in that assumption, I apologize, and please correct me.
If I may, Your Worship, just a couple of things. First of all, the structure that you see in this new report is fundamentally no different than what's currently posted on our website. The one that's posted on our website has no structure to it in terms of the movement through the grid. This one does. So the same thing that Councillor McCormick referred to in terms of getting step increases and the inflationary adjustment that you suggest would happen now could already happen. The only difference is now we're going to institute a performance framework so that the instance of that happening would be very rare. So that's the first point I'd like to make. The second point is, as briefed previously to Council, we control the levers by which this affects Budget 2023. So the framework is there, people get moved in. We articulated the cost of that in this year was, I believe, $40,000. Any further movement in that grid would be then budget dependent. So if Council were to come back and say, we can't afford this, then nobody would move within the grid. So we have full control over that. This fundamentally sets the framework around which you compensate employees moving into the future. It doesn't say that people are going to get 2.5 plus 4%. Absolutely not. So if I may be so bold as to implore Council to look at not the impact the next budget, because we can control that, but to put in place something that I think this employee group has been looking for many years is a structure around which they're compensated. Because if we don't do that now, I'm not sure when we would do it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
To build on that comment from CAO Pinsent, this structure makes a very clear and defined structure of fairness throughout the organization, of equity throughout the organization. And again, we understand from the discussions we've had that led us to approve the formulation of this budget for tonight, which we directed staff to do, that this puts the control in the hands of senior leadership and council and takes away any previous automatic steps or anything else. It gives us full control. And I'll just reiterate once again, in August, we gave direction to prepare this bylaw through a resolution. I think it was 5-2, it doesn't really matter now. So here it is. It's a clear structure, it's fair in the sense of fair to all staff within the organization, that it's equitable and treats everyone fairly and equally. And that was a key driving motivation to making this grid, but it also gives us full control going forward.
Before we go any further, can I get a motion to go beyond 10 o'clock, please? Councillor McCormack, Councillor Richardson, all in favor of that motion. Motion's carried. Thank you. Did you wish to speak again, Councillor McCormack?
Thank you, Worship. I just want to comment on that. I feel bad that if that's the perception, and I guess that's what we asked for, but in my mind, it was 2.25%, not 6.25%. And I see the opportunity here for multiple 6.25%, and I'm not comfortable with that. And this might not be a good example, but if you're on final and you're about to land and things are not all the way they should be, you do a go-around. Well, I'm doing a go-around. I'm very sorry, but I don't like this. And I don't think that it should be for us to decide when the next council is a month away, sort of thing. So that's it.
Any further? Go ahead, Councillor Norrie.
To save messing up all this hard work, which I can see both sides, is it possible just to table it till the new council, or is that too late? Or, I mean, we're not saying no, we don't want it, but I don't want to see all this work go in the shredder. Been through pay equity and stuff years ago, so I understand the work, but there's just so many unknowns that council obviously is worried about with this time of year. So is there any way it could just be put on hold for, I don't know, December, whenever the new council starts? I don't know. Just a thought.
Well, I'm not in a position to answer that question. Would any staff like to take a crack at it?
We can, through your worship to Councillor Norrie, sure, we can table it. And bring it back for the next council to decide. It's, let me be blunt. We've told staff this was coming based on a resolution of council. We now have to undo that work. Whether that's shame on me for doing it, but we were confident based on the last discussion we had with council to prepare a bylaw to come back with this in open session. We had the discussion in closed, we had it in open to come back. So we made the announcement, we've sent out letters, we've amended contracts. I'm not going to sit here and hold anybody hostage saying you've got to do it based on what we've done, but that's the implications of where we are right now. We can simply do that, we just put it on pause.
So, go
I'm
ahead.
just saying I'd
Councillor.
rather do that than vote it down after all this hard work, and I don't want to deflate staff, but you can also see some concerns here of maybe future councilors or past councilors. So it's such a weird area with this election that, I mean, And I don't think it's deflating staff. They understand we want them to have it, but there's so many unknowns unless I'm missing the boat here.
If I may.
Certainly, Michael.
Yeah, I guess I'd like some clarity. I believe I was given direction to implement this after our last resolution, and that's been done. What's tabled in front of you is to essentially amend the existing bylaw to substitute the table that was already approved at our previous meeting back in, I believe it was August. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Jessica.
No, through your worship, that is correct. At the meeting on August 9th, council approved this grid, and the direction was that this bylaw be brought so that it's part of the public record, so that it's formally in a bylaw, whereas previously this grid was always just approved by council in closed session as a municipal document. We were looking to formalize it. But the resolution on the books, you would have to rescind that resolution if you are wanting to defer implementation of this bylaw tonight, if that is no longer council's intention.
So I guess I would caution council that wheels are beyond in motion. Legal documents have been signed and there are other repercussions of rescinding this at this point.
Go ahead, Councillor Richardson.
I guess if the wheels are in motion, why are we even here talking about it? Ultimately, the decision has to be made tonight. And if this council is not comfortable to make that decision, I don't think we should be pushed or coerced into making a decision if we're not comfortable in doing it. It's as simple as that. I mean, I have to apologize. I mean, I've been I've disagreed with it since day one. So my opinion hasn't changed, but we're here to change a bylaw. And if we're not comfortable in doing it, I don't think anybody should try and coerce us into doing something that.
I don't think anyone's trying to coerce anyone. What they're trying to do, and I'm going to interrupt you here because I don't want us getting to either, and I know that's not your intention, Councillor Richardson, to bash staff or to, no, just let me finish here, please, or criticize staff. It has gone on in in the chambers before. I know that you're of the opinion that you don't agree with it and you don't need to apologize for it, and that's fine. It did pass as a resolution, 5-2. We now have staff in a position that we put them in. It is a democracy. 5-2 that they prepare this and they put the wheels in motion so that staff knows where they are. But I'll just ask you that if you disagree with it, I understand that. But it is something that certainly has been started under our direction, agreed or not agreed. Go ahead.
Very simply put, Your Worship, we've been asked to vote whether we want to do this, and if we do that, it passes, then fine. If it doesn't pass, then I'm sure the clerk can direct us as to what the next steps are, I guess, whether it's tabling, whether it's rescinding motions, or what it is. But I mean, I've been outspoken on this since day one, so I think I've said all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? I'm going to go to Councillor Norrie and then I'll go to Deputy Mayor Kaiser. And did I have anybody else over here? No? Okay.
Just for my clarification, I know it's 5-2 and I remember how we voted. I was hoping to see how we're going to pay for it, but are you saying 2023, if there's no money to give the 4%, it doesn't happen? Or if it goes above the 2.95? I'm worried about the logistics of if everything, all the wheels come together and it's paid. I'm worried about how we're going to pay for it, staying in the 2.95. That's my concern.
So
I don't have a problem with the document.
Okay.
I like it, but
yeah.
you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So through your worship to Councillor Norrie, so we had presented, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I'll start this, was that the movement of existing staff into that grid. So basically lining everybody up to where they start from. Including the employment equity was something in the neighborhood of $40,000 for this year. So that was your getting everybody into the right grid. After that, there was a resolution of council that any increases would not go past a 2.95%, not by resolution tax increase, but the approved sort of guidelines for working over the next 5 years was we wouldn't increase taxes any more than 2.95%. So based on the current employment levels that we have right now. So, and that was presented to council, I believe the number was around $147,000 there or abouts, let's say 140, right? And the direction that we were given was that we had to find that within a proposed 2.95%. Now, Michael's also proposed different scenarios, and what we've discussed internally was, and that $140,000 was moving people up into another step in that ladder. Let's call that grid a ladder. So everybody started on a rung commensurate with where they were. $147,000 was to move people up a grid or up a step in that ladder based on performance. The performance framework was based on what we're doing in our strategic plan around a value set. So you basically have to demonstrate that you match the values that we look for in an employee. And then what you had to do is you had to achieve performance objectives based on a priority exercise, also coming out of the strategic plan, that I would ask the next council to endorse. So here's the 15 things you want from the CAO and his leadership team. If the municipal employee met his or her part in that, they would potentially move up a rung in that ladder. But we also stated that if we couldn't afford it, we would go back to the employee group and say, you know what, we cannot afford a movement in that ladder this year, so everybody stays where they are. So those are the levers that we have in there right now that were never in there before. So to be blunt, what you had before was a grid system, which if you dive into that grid system, some of the increments were at 2%, some of them were at 6.7%, they're all over the map. They're also based on employment contracts that linked employees' training and not performance. So fundamentally they were flawed. So we fixed that. So this is what I'm saying to council is, we'll do what's necessary legislatively to change this, and staff do not coerce council to do anything. Let me be clear on that. We do not coerce, and I would never want to be accused of that. All I'm saying is that we've taken steps based on what we thought, the guidance I gave staff, and I'm ultimately accountable for that, based on council's decision to proceed with a bylaw to put that grid in place. So we can control 2023 expenditures based on movement on that ladder. So if council says implement it, no movement in the ladder, that's what we do. If council says we don't like it, send it to the next term of council, we'll do that. And if we have to go back and rescind a bylaw, that's a vote and words on a piece of paper. No harm, no foul. So let's be clear on that. So those are the pieces that we're in right now. Is it uncomfortable? Is it awkward? I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. It's very awkward because I'm sitting here as your only employee with 60, 70, 80 staff who we've made a commitment to that we'll just say, we'll wait. But that's my job, and I can deal with that. So that's where we are.
Go ahead, Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Worship. I'll go back one more time that I had 2.25% on my mind. The way it was structured and presented earlier today before it was revised was a real jump in my books. OPP, 1% raise. Nurses, Bill 124, 1% raise. When you're talking about the possibility of 6.25%, it just doesn't sit. And it's really none of our business because we have to rely on staff to be able to manage and do all that. But nonetheless, we don't know where staff fit in the grid, how many are in the middle, how many are at the bottom, how many at the top. There were 4 employees, one has already resigned. There were 4 employees that we had agreed that they needed to be addressed, from the get-go, and that was fine. But I was comfortable with that. I was comfortable with the 2.25%. I just can't have a hard time leaving this as a possibility of multiple 6.25s. Doesn't matter what happened in the past. This is now tonight, and I'm really sorry if we got to this point with my encouragement previously, but tonight I'm not. I think what Councillor Norrie has proposed might be a good solution, but I'll leave it up to the rest of them.
But I guess my only point is that if you're adding the 2.2, that's okay, Michael, I got it. The 2.25 plus the 4 in the increments, we have control over that 4. That's all we're saying, is if council says there's to be no movement in increments, then there's no 4, until such time as we can demonstrate we can afford it.
Go ahead, Michael.
If I may add, the increments and increase in steps and the 2.25 is no different from what currently exists. What you're concerned about can happen whether or not this is in place or not. We have the existing step increases today, and we have the existing 2.5% increase in 2023 today in a bylaw.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, I hate that saying, because sometimes I am wrong. Was that an intended cough?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Let's go.
So the 2.25 or 2.5, we sat down at the beginning of this session of council, and we appointed somebody to sit down with staff and negotiate something that would be palatable for the non-union staff, I think, and maybe it did go with the union as well. Who was on that committee? And did you not sit in on some of it as well?
I sat in for Councillor Norrie when he was absent.
So, recommendation was brought to us, and how long did that go for? Was it 4 years or 5 years?
I think it was 4, Your Worship. If my
I
memory
think it
serves me
was
right,
too.
yeah.
I think it was too. So that's where that came from. That part's on us. Okay, I just wanted to, I was pretty sure that it was this term of council that had done it, and that council had been involved in it. We can go around in circles to this for the next 3 hours, which I have no intention of doing, or we can make a decision tonight. I believe that staff has brought forward to us exactly what they were asked for, even though it was not a unanimous decision. But we're going to have to go with what the 7 people sitting around here tonight decide, and then staff is going to have to take it back to the rest of staff to let them know. Deputy Mayor, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just one last comment that I was thinking of a few minutes ago, and that is, coming into tonight, we had a verbal or handshake agreement, and now we've got a legal document in front of us that needs to be signed, and that's what the bylaw is really, is just making it formal and legal and complete. But coming into that, we'd hammered it out and we'd come to the decision. And I didn't expect it to be a unanimous sell right from the get-go, but it doesn't have to be. I look at the discussions we had through July and August 9th, we came to that handshake agreement. Here's the legal portion of it in a bylaw, and we should be just making sure that the T's and I's are dotted appropriately as per what we agreed to, and that's where I'm coming from, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Anything else? If not, go ahead, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. A question. The 2.25 increase is guaranteed under pre-existing contract?
Yes.
Or what,
I'm nodding my
2.25,
head.
2.5, I'm not positive of the, so we are not changing that whatsoever.
That is correct.
So regardless of what happens, that is moving forward. This council is not going to be changing that. Do we have the ability to accept the grid and say there will be no movement on the grid until the next council has an opportunity to review the numbers as part of the budget process? Can we be that clear and concise? And then as we're getting phone calls from people who are saying you're giving crazy raises and you're leaving council and you're hobnobbing the next council with the very expensive costs. No, we're not. All we're doing is meeting our current agreement, setting up the structure for the next council to decide on step increases or wage policies. That's for the next council to do.
Absolutely.
This is just a structure.
So the idea and the cost we presented, we're putting everybody into that right starting structure. And I think that was the $40,000 number that we presented. But as I mentioned, and I know, as soon as we got the first notes this morning, people are adding 4 and 2.5 and going 6, and, that's ludicrous. Had the 4 not been there, it would have been just like another grid. So yeah, we can simply say to staff that there's no grid movement. And that's your 4%, and that's my point, is that there won't be a 6 next year because it's the 2.5 or 2.25 what's already agreed to. We move everybody into the grid, and then you stop, you pause.
Go ahead, Terry.
But that wasn't the reason why we did this to begin with. I mean, if my memory serves me right, and I'm going to be very, very cautious because there's certain things that we can say and certain things we can't say with respect to closed session, but that's not the purpose. The purpose of the creating of the new grid was to get our staff at a different level. And I'm hoping that Madam Clerk will stop me when I start talking too much. But that was the purpose of it. The purpose was to get our staff at a level that they're not at right now. And so I just think we're setting our staff up for some disappointment by saying you're going to get a merit increase because you're doing a good job, because you had a good evaluation. But we're not going to give it to you because we can't afford it. And we can't afford it in 2023. We'll see what happens in 2024. And 2024 is even worse. But then they've got a second good evaluation that says you are a rock star, you are doing really well, but we can't give you another raise. I think we're just setting them up for a whole lot of disappointment. So I would really, I mean, I've said it from the start, I want to see how this plays out with respect to a budget. We've got a lot of balls in the air with respect to buildings and properties that we're either going to buy or we're going to sell. I mean, all you do is have to turn the computer on first thing in the morning. Interest rates are climbing. People are having a tough time making ends meet. People are going to have a tough time paying their taxes. The timing just isn't very good. I mean, I'm the first one to admit, and I just, in my heart, honestly believe that we've got to get some of the balls out of the air. We've got a bunch of plans that are going to require, I'm going to guess, some money. But we don't know what that is yet, so I just think it's preemptive. And it pains me to say that because I have a lot of people that are friends. I have a lot of people that are cohorts. I have a lot of people that I've known since day one. I just feel a responsibility that there seems to be a hurry to do this. There's a rush to do this. I just don't think that we need to do it right away without knowing exactly where we are, where we're going to sit, and what we need to do with respect to the future. Like I say, we've promised that we're only going to mortgage $1.5 million for a new building, which is worth $5.8 million. I supported that 100%, but that was contingent on selling properties. And those properties that we're going to sell may sell for what they've told us they're worth, or they may sell for more, but they may sell for less. So again, I apologize for being overcautious, and your worship, I know you say I don't have to apologize, but that's who I am, and I will. So
That's okay, you're allowed.
Thank you.
Okay. Council, we need to get this, voted on and get something so the staff can go forward and do what they do. Councillor Richardson has asked for a recorded vote. I'm assuming that if it is defeated, I will not have to ask for a third reading.
Just procedurally.
Yes.
To clarify. At this point, you have the motion to introduce it and bring it to the floor for discussion.
Okay.
You have had that discussion. At that point, once that motion is, I suppose that wasn't voted on, but at that point, your next options are to give it third reading and adopt it, to defer it, or to refuse to give it third reading.
Okay, so let's give it to the third. Do we need to, do we
So
need to vote
I
on
have
the
a
first
mover and a
second?
seconder for the first reading and introducing it for discussion, and I
Okay,
don't
and we
think we
have done
voted on,
that?
I don't know if we voted on
No,
it.
we haven't.
But the
So
discussion has
if we could
happened.
just vote on the first and second for discussion, which was brought to the floor for that purpose. All in favor of that motion? It's an innocent one.
We
It
just
lets us-
discussed it.
We've discussed it. Motion is carried. Now, finally, a third time. And what it is going to be is still to amend, and we'll see if this one flies, and then we'll make a decision on anything else. If the third and final reading is defeated as it is presented, my options are that can someone vote to amend it to read? I just want to make sure that we have options open to us.
Through your worship, while you are between your first and final reading, council can also pass motions to amend the content of the bylaw.
Okay, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I'm gonna move a third reading of this bylaw that enacts this pay grid. And as an aside, it doesn't presume any percent step increases, raises, or other, but only the pay grid. I'll move that. That's the bylaw.
Okay, got what you need there for a motion that's in tune with the bylaws presented? Councillor Richardson has asked for a recorded vote, okay. Yep.
I don't think I have a seconder.
Oh, sorry.
I moved it.
Moved it, okay, I need a seconder, please.
I'll second
Councillor
it so we
Johnson.
can vote.
Now, we can have a recorded vote,
So
please.
just before, pardon me, Mayor, just before we have the vote, just so that people who are watching on YouTube understand, this is meeting the existing contract and not changing anybody's steps or steps on the ladder. Nobody's moving. This is just for the grid.
We're going to move people into that initial grid, and then there'll be no further movement.
But that cost was.
So that was the $40,000
That's right.
for this year.
Yeah,
It's
which was
to-
part of the resolution
Yes.
from August
To
the
get people
9th.
into the grid,
Which was within the existing budget.
yes.
Yes,
So it's no change to this budget.
that's right,
And we're not committing the next council to any change in budget.
correct.
Okay.
We're just lining people up.
Okay. Got everything you need, Madam Clerk? I'll let you call,
Yes, I guess
please.
I need to start calling the votes. Okay. Councillor Ward 1. Councillor Ward 2.
No.
I didn't hear your
Sorry.
vote.
Oh, I shook my head, I'm sorry, Your Worship.
Yeah, no, people at home can't see that, okay?
No.
Councillor Ward 3.
No.
Councillor Ward 4.
No.
Councillor Ward 5.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor.
Yes.
Mayor.
Yes,
So that is 3 in favor and 4 opposed.
yeah, motion is defeated. Okay. So, we'll go on to the next item. 11 point.
Sorry, if we can just stay on this item
Okay.
for one moment.
Yep.
The bylaw has been introduced. Council does not want to adopt it tonight. Can we get some direction on what to do with this bylaw now?
Okay, good point.
As I suggested, bring it to next council with the budget deliberations.
Can you move your?
I'm losing my voice, sorry.
Thank you, that's okay. So am I.
Bring it to next council. With, with the budget deliberations, that's what I was hoping to see.
So your motion would be to direct staff to bring it to the council, for deliberations in preparation for the next council to approve or disapprove. No?
That's what I said, yes.
To bring it to the next council as part of their budget deliberations
Yeah.
is what he said.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Richardson. Have what you need?
Yes.
All in favor of the motion? Opposed?
Abstaining.
Pardon?
Abstaining.
Abstaining, that's a no vote anyway. Okay, thank you. Bylaw number, we're finished, I can move on then?
Yeah.
Okay. Bylaw 1110, bylaw number 2022-0068 to amend Township of South Fredericksburg, bylaw number 83-80, a bylaw to designate 9190 Highway 33 to be of historical significance, to amend the bylaw to make it consistent with the requirements of the Ontario Heritage Act. First, second, and third readings. Councillor Pennell, Councillor McCormack, all in favor of that bylaw? Motion is carried, thank you. Any new business? Any notices of motion? Go ahead, Councillor Johnson.
Just a sec, Mayor, I lost my notes. Sorry. Okay. I would like to bring notice of motion. We have been talking about transportation with the provincial minister and working on improving the ferry access timetable and guaranteeing the ferry service. I think as we consider transportation, we should also revisit the rail service to Greater Napanee. This is something that this council spoke about almost 4 years ago, about improving the stops at the Napanee train station and the marketing for the trains to say that these stops are available. And I would like to revisit that and ask them to look at including us in their schedules on a more permanent basis.
So your notice of motion would be then to bring forward, and because we can't discuss it tonight for a
Correct.
notice of motion, but your notice of motion would be investigation on rail transportation?
Yes.
Bring it forward to the floor for
Yes.
discussion? Okay?
Thank you.
Does that give you enough information for a notice of motion?
Through your worship, just to clarify, so notice of motion, we'll vote on this at the next meeting and you'll get me the exact text
Yes.
of the resolution? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any statements by members? Go ahead, Councillor Nari.
I just received a couple of calls from some former BIA stakeholders from downtown. They're just curious. They were told when it disbanded there'd be some sort of meeting between staff and the stakeholders in regards to the surplus to, now they're worried about the big bright light show and late night shopping that have to be start working on. Is there any plans for a meeting with some of the old stakeholders to, as was said when they disbanded the BIA?
Go ahead, Mr. Zatterberg.
Your worship, there's been continual dialogue with downtown merchants since the disbanding.
Maybe they didn't get the memo. I'll let them know. Okay, thank you.
Any other statements by members? Seeing none, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Greater Napanee. First, second, and third reading. Deputy Mayor Kaiser. Councillor Richardson, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Motion for adjournment. Deputy Mayor Kaiser, Councillor McCormack, all in favor of that motion? Motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Good night.